What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Art of War stream. This time it is the faction tier list. So we are going to rank every single army in the game, and this is going to be based on the new balance update. It's a massive shift for the game. Lots of fundamental changes to the core rules, but then also every single faction got something. Whether it nerf, a buff, both.
Some got both. A lot of people got both, actually.
A lot of people got both. So it's a really exciting time. This isn't necessarily going to be impressionistic. We're at the very beginnings of this meta, but we've been playing as many games as we can. We've been thinking about all the new ideas for lists, and we're going to kind of put that knowledge here and present it to you. So if you like this type of content, if you've been here before at the Art of War, please give us a like, leave a comment below letting us know what you think about our choices at the end of this one, as well as what you're most looking forward to in the new meta. Subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, give us a like. All of that massively helps. In addition, if you want to see more balance update content, where could you find it, John?
You can absolutely find it in the War Room. You can subscribe to that on our website or right here on the YouTube channel. Just click that link in the description below, thewarroom.vhx.tv, and you can get a free 3-day trial. If you've been watching our videos on YouTube, or maybe you're new to us, and you want to check out what the War Room is all about, that free trial is for you. That's where you can, see what we do, see all the content we're putting out, and trust me, we are putting out a lot of amazing 40k content right now. We've got multiple games with the balanced data slate. We've got multiple other content pieces. We're, it's live, we're here, we're ready. We're all so excited about the new face of 10th edition. And, of course, you can become a member on the YouTube channel as well. Yeah. But just become a member of the Art of War community.
Yeah, we just released new Codex Tyranids versus brand new updated Tau. Yep. Huge game. So awesome.
Yeah, we also had Tyranids going up against the new and improved Death Guard. We had a Grey Knights versus Necron game.
Yep.
I think later this week we've got, is it CSM versus Black Templars coming up?
That's coming up
That's
as well.
Going to be a barn. I can't wait to see how that one goes.
Oh, yeah. So, let's go ahead and dive right in here to the tier list. And before we start ranking anybody, let's talk about how we're going to rank them.
Absolutely. So, Richard, this is the first time you and I have done a tier list together in a while.
In a long time, yeah.
I've actually been missing out on these last few. I've been
this
watching
is the
from
classic
the window.
combo, right?
Absolutely, this is the best combo. Everyone knows that. So, what we're doing here is we're ranking every army in the game based on what we think its competitive potential is. We're not talking just about averages here.
Yep.
So we're thinking, all right, if a player who takes the faction, knows it, loves it, has experience, a high caliber player playing this army to its absolute best, someone who's willing to go buy 30 Hearthguard, someone who's willing to go min-max, do what they have to do to get the faction to win, how does the army fare then? Yep. And we're ranking it with that in mind. So we're not just saying, all right, what's the average Custodes faction if you maybe don't have access to Forge World models? It's no, if you're willing to go buy 3 Caladius and 7 Dreadnoughts from Forge World and you practice it, what's the most this faction could achieve?
Exactly.
So we're ranking the top end of each faction.
If you only have, a particular army that only has one good build that can punch up, we're going to be ranking it based on that build. Yes, Absolutely. They might have a lot of options that aren't particularly great, but that's not what this tier list is about. We would love those units to get fixed, but this one's about your highest potential.
Absolutely. And something else to consider here is we're not going just off of the numbers.
Yep.
I like numbers. I like math. I like looking at win rates, and that's definitely going to affect my decision, but it's not the end-all be-all. We don't think that win rates are always representative. Sometimes you have armies, in 9th edition, I think Tau is a great example of this, that had a relatively pedestrian win rate that let them not get nerfed for longer than they deserved. But that army was still very capable of winning large events and would often put up 49% win rate, won a super major as like a weekend for Tau. And we thought that that army was a little bit better than average. So we'll see, the at least one army that we're going to talk about today had a 70% win rate last weekend, and yet we think that it overperformed by winning a couple RTTs. And we don't think that it's actually the best army in the game.
Yep, we're also going to, we have a lot of data before the balance update of where factions were. That's going to kind of not really inform too many of the decisions that we're going to make. We're kind of going at a blank slate here. What exactly do we think based on the new games that we're playing and the new lists that we're theorizing? How are they going to fit into a tier list?
Yeah, and I always love doing these early meta tier lists because you know what? At least one army, at least one in 3 months, we're going to look back and say, you know what? We really missed the 18 Skull Crusher demon list, and we definitely underranked demons. There's always one thing, right?
Exactly.
There's always one. Maybe we didn't notice that Beasts of Nurgle are now 7 points model.
Especially because the meta is going to change pretty rapidly over the next couple weeks, and as soon as we start seeing what the real SA tiers are, and those start getting refined, and you know what's winning events, what you have to start tailoring for, all of a sudden these weird janky builds come out of the woodwork that are targeted to defeat those.
Absolutely. So this one should be a ton of fun. And seeing how the meta evolves over the next couple months in the Warhammer is also going to be really fun.
Absolutely, John.
All
right. We're going to start up here with the Adeptus Mechanicus, an army that was towards the bottom, but not insanely low. It wasn't all the way down there with Votann. It has a problem with ineffective units. Their units basically they need a lot of units on the table to do damage.
Yeah.
You need redundancy and a lot of it. There's a couple units that are good. The Omnipulus is still quite good, even with the wound change.
God.
He's not as good into like one wound things, but he's still darn good. And then you have Breachers, which have full rerolls. They went down slightly, but my AdMech list, which I expected to go up like 150 to 200 points, only went down 95. I expected to have more than one unit in an AdMech list, frankly, based on just playing them on the table. So my opinion of them is that they are towards the very bottom of the factions. And that's because they don't have a lot of ways to ignore cover, and cover is everywhere. And on top of that, they have very few weapons that are in high enough volume, high AP, to deal with monsters and vehicles quick enough.
Yeah, I haven't played against AdMech with the balance changes, but their rules didn't change fundamentally.
Yep.
They got a little bit tougher on their infantry units, which is good, but I don't actually have to play against that to know what that did for the unit, right? +1 armor save and invuln is a good change.
And cheaper too.
And cheaper, but I know what that does. I can look at an AdMech list and say, I played against this, now it gained 100, 150 points. Maybe not as many as you would have expected. Certainly, a lot of the bottom armies are defined by how much they gained here from where they were before. It feels like AdMech are lacking. Honestly, what it feels like to me is that GW knows that AdMech is getting a codex in the next couple months.
Yep, it's on the roadmap for winter.
Exactly, yeah.
They have one of the worst detachments in the entire game, the Rad Saturation Cohort. The actual rule itself is bad. The stratagems are okay. So AdMech is very limited in that they really only have one playstyle, which is we're pretty good against vehicle armies, but hopefully they don't have a 2-up armor of contempt access and cover, because then we basically do nothing.
That's the main thing I noticed playing against AdMech was that the AP on a lot of the weapons was lacking for an army that didn't ignore cover.
It's because their rule it gives you +1 AP if your opponent's in their deployment zone.
Yeah.
So if they stay in their deployment zone, you can actually kill them.
Yeah, I very quickly figured out that I just was like, oh, if it's in line of sight, just move it forward. And then I was closer to the AdMech army and I was taking less damage. I'm like, oh, this is a good combo.
One of the rare instances where it's better to get shot in the middle of the table than in your deployment zone.
It's much better, because then I get to hit the AdMech after they don't ignore cover and shoot me with kind of mid AP weapons.
Exactly. So I think they have a couple styles. One is going to be heavy on the Breachers, heavy on the Iron Striders, heavy on Dragoons. These just relatively cheap for the durability you get for your points, but at the same time they still don't do reliable damage. Or you're going to spam a lot of troop bodies, a lot of Dune Riders, and just try and constantly contest primary, do your actions with a lot of mission stuff like Taraxi. So they can still play the mission pretty well, and the Calidus Assassin is quite a bit cheaper. It just fits nicely into an AdMech list. I also think Canis Rex going down and the change to towering actually is a really nice ally option for AdMech.
Skip into my sister section.
Well, we know where they're going to be.
I do agree. I think AdMech is firmly below average. I think that they have enough builds to keep them out of D tier.
Yeah, I don't think they are the worst army in the game because they can punch up. And I think that a lot of the armies we're probably going to see, because I'm thinking C tier to start to throw them into.
I agree.
I think the armies that are going to be around them, they can absolutely play into, no problem. And they could probably punch up okay into the B tier armies. But there's going to be several armies that they just really don't have answers to. Yeah. I'm thinking armies like Necrons are just a problem for them.
And so fully agreed. So 2 quick notes that I want to make here. First is that I think at least when we're placing these, we're probably going to do a little bit of just let's put it in the letter tier, and we might reorder it halfway through, and then reorder it again at the end. Exactly. So we don't have to spend every single army now where is it relative to the other 5 armies in C tier, etc. Second, we wonderfully appreciate all the support we get in chat, all the super chats. We are planning to hold all super chats to the end, even if it is from Cyborg John Lennon from 2051, whose hand is a spatula.
I mean, I do want to hear what that guy has to say. I
kind of want to hear that one.
But at the same time, we are going to save all those super chats to the very end and do them all in one go. That way, it doesn't interrupt the flow as much.
Absolutely.
But thank you for all your support. We genuinely appreciate it, and we will answer every single one towards the end.
Every single one. So keep those super chats coming. We really appreciate it, and we will address all of them.
All right, John.
All right. Alphabetical does get us through the A's pretty quickly.
There's an amazing army here, and I believe it's called Aeldari. Okay.
Yep, Aeldari up next. All right, set the clock. We're going 13-minute rant. Let's go.
Where's Jack?
All right, so Aeldari, look, we know where they were before.
Yep.
Before Eldar was the undisputed king of S tier. There was no questions asked. You know it's bad when the Eldar players admit their army is the best in the game. Because normally Eldar players are like, I don't know, man. I think we're a bottom tier army. We just happen to win 60% of our games through raw skill. But once they crossed 75, something in them broke. And they said, maybe we are actually good. Like, just maybe... Very small nerf, 5 points on the Wraith Knight would be acceptable.
When you would look at Meta Monday and the top 10 placings would be Aeldari, Custodes, maybe some other faction, Aeldari.
the clean top, there's a tournament in North Carolina that had a clean top 6 Aeldari. It's like beautiful.
Yeah.
So we've taken a couple nerfs on Aeldari. They didn't change the rules much. They changed the points a lot, and they changed one rule plus all the core changes.
Yep.
So, to me, it feels like they nerfed the Wraith Knight, not Aeldari, because they changed Phantasm to infantry only, which does limit certain aspects of Eldar, but I feel like it's nerfs that Eldar can play around with relatively low effort.
They can't possibly have great infantry units, John.
Yeah, like, just put the... Because, like, there's always the, I'm going to bait you with one unit who, if you try to commit, will Phantasm, and if you don't commit, will Phantasm forward onto objectives and then kill you. And now you just use an infantry unit for that instead of vehicle.
Phantasm in my brain is very much like the 9th edition Mirror Architect rule for Harlequins, which was just, when combined with what the army has, it's just a broken mechanic. It just cannot exist. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care about minor nerfs to it. You could have made it 2 CP. I don't care. It is still fundamentally broken. And Wraithguard, Warp Spiders, all the different amazing infantry units that they have take full advantage of it. Shadow Specters. So it is a nerf. It's a nerf to a particular style, but the stratagem is still going to be used every single turn.
Yeah. This is my favorite example to give about Phantasm, because yes, you are getting the 13-minute Eldar rant. I like to play chess sometimes on the side.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly good at chess. I'm much better at Warhammer than chess. I don't put a lot of effort into getting better at chess. If I were to play, I believe Magnus Carlsen's the current #1 in the world for chess. If I were to play him 10 times in chess, he would win all 10 games, no questions asked. Like, not even there's no, like, maybe I get lucky. No, 10 out of 10, he beats me every time. No questions asked. If you gave me an extra rook in a game of chess, Magnus Carlsen would still beat me 10 times. Fully confident that I would be lucky to get a game on him with an extra rook. I don't think I would at all. I think he would still crush me. Now, if you let me move 2 pieces every time Magnus moved 1 piece, I would then beat him at chess. Promise. If I got to move twice... Every time he moved, I would win that game.
I hope somebody actually knows Magnus Carlsen, tells him, and then we can get this match.
You know what? Honestly, look, if I lose that, if I can move twice and he can move once and I still lose, so be it, right? That's Phantasm. That's Phantasm right there. Like, just, oh, you moved, now I move. Oh, now it's my turn, I move. Like, what? Come on.
Don't worry, they're still moving in their turn too with striking,
Twice,
with fire and fade, so...
Yeah, watching other players get triple the movement phases of me, and I'm like, oh, you sure are outplaying me right now. Look at you.
When you have an army that has insane speed, some of the best speed in the entire game, some of the best fast shooting in the game as well, and you give them stratagems like that, it just takes them to an entire new level. And there's very few armies that can play around it, because a lot of armies lost speed in this edition, going from 9th to 10th edition.
Yeah.
Aeldari are one of the few that are just like, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, my personal opinion is that I think heading into the new meta, Aeldari are still the strongest faction in the game. They have the best rules, and that's partly because they just didn't get adjusted enough. I think Games Workshop put too much emphasis on the dev wounds change. It was absolutely a problem. It needed to change. We needed to lower their potential damage output, especially into larger horde type units. But at the same time, too many of their rules and combinations and data sheets are too good. They're just better than what every other army has.
Yes.
So they needed not only significant points increases that they did get on certain units, not all of them, and some were much lower than others, like Warp Spiders or Wraithguard. But then at the same time, they didn't get fundamental rules changes enough, besides Phantasm, and like I said, you're still auto-using it. So I think they are by far the best army in the game, and I think they will still have the easily above 55% win rate.
Fully agreed on that. I think Eldar, if I had to take a guess, I would say they're going to land right around the 60 mark. I think that they did successfully crack the first layer of Eldar problems. It's so hard to see what's inside the egg until you crack the shell. And that is that Eldar without the Wraith Knight, with the Wraith Knight being what it is, which is still actually pretty good. It's still better than like most knights.
Yeah.
But no longer having towering reach and dev wound craze. So I think that you just no longer have, Eldar just table you turn 2.
Yeah.
But we've gotten past that point. I can now play with Eldar till turn 4 and 5. Great, that is positive progress. But now I get to play the game with 40k. Cool. They're just still better at it than the army I'm currently playing. So you get past the first layer of that. And I now think we're at the point, by the way, that you can actually try to outplay an Eldar player.
Yeah. I think whoever allowed Capture Enemy Outpost to be a secondary that you can try and achieve turn 1 only played Eldar, because it's the only faction that I see that can just reliably do it. It's like, boom,
it's so true.
It's like, it's the only army that it just shows you how much above they are than everybody else. Everybody else is discarding that for a CP. Eldar are like, no problem, done, 8 points.
Yeah, all right, so we know where Eldar's going here. They're still going to S. Hashtag Buggy Eater was right.
Now, like I said, they're not so far above everybody where they will just win every top placing. You can beat them now, and some armies are much better at it than others, but they're still above everything. They are just better, both in rules and data sheets.
So Eldar right now, the last thing I'll say is that Eldar to me feel like it's like second time nerfed Drukhari right now. Where Drukhari in like towards the end of the year 2021 would still go win a super major. They just wouldn't win everyone. And it was rare to see more than 2 Drukhari in like a top 8.
Yeah.
There would always be 1 or 2. But you're no longer going to a tournament seeing a top 8 that's like 4 Drukhari.
Yeah.
I think Eldar is about to hit that point where I expect to see Eldar in the top 8 of almost every major event. I expect to see Eldar still winning events and probably still winning more events than anyone else. But there will now be armies that have positive matchups in Eldar. There'll be a couple that can actually do it most of the time.
It was just GSC, I think, that had a positive win rate.
Yeah, and even then that was starting to reverse. I think right towards the end we got back to Eldar positive into GSC. But Eldar S tier, they are much reduced, but they are still really dang good. Yeah. And the dedicated Eldar players that know how to play the mission after tabling you turn 2 now will say, oh man, I only table you turn 4, I guess I have to score points. Yeah. And I think they're still able to do that very well.
And don't forget the stealth buff to Phantasm. It's not a battle tactic strat, so you can't vect it and make it increase the CP cost of it, which was a key thing. Yeah.
That was a key part of... Yeah. I mean, I had entire lists built around getting 2 vects in, so that Phantasm cost 3 CP after they'd used it. And now it's just like, oh god. Yeah, my Deathwatch list was purely built around Vect Phantasm twice the second it shows up. Like, put them turn 1, sacrifice units that they have to Phantasm, and then just kill it. Never again.
All right, the next army is near and dear to your heart.
It's true. Astra Millitarum. A hard army to rank right now.
Tell us about them.
Okay. So, Astra, win rate was never amazing.
No.
At least in 10th. I don't think they've ever cracked 50% in 10th edition. They're relatively one-dimensional, but we saw the one list being heavy on the indirect, doing very well. It actually had the best performing slot of the WTC this year. It was relatively hard to just like win a single tournament outright with them, but I think Guard did scrape together a small number of event wins. But then they took actually pretty heavy points nerfs on that list, but they also got pretty decent points buffs on the things that weren't there, because Guard were so polarizing. It was a ton of bad units and indirect that was too good. And anytime indirect is too good, they might just blow people out.
Yep.
So you still have that threat. And I think Guard have very polarizing matchups, which again makes it hard to rank them. Because wherever we put them, when we're done with this list, I'm going to look and say, man, Guard are going to wreck that army that's ranked above them, but they're totally going to lose to that army that's ranked below them.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to put them here. I think that with the points changes, the forge roll batteries are no longer something you do.
They went up a lot.
Like, I think they went from like 80 to 120 or something, like vaguely in that ballpark.
Yeah.
Went to the point that I hadn't built mine yet, and I was like, honestly, man, I'm so glad, because I built one and it was miserable. And I was kind of happy that I'm like, I don't think I have to build these anymore. But you still probably take 4 or 5 indirect pieces in a Guard list. I think you still take 3 Manticores, 1 or 2 Basilisks. The Dorn went down a lot, which is actually really appealing. Guard have some ability to push with like cheap Sentinels that come back, and Hellhounds and Infantry and Chimeras. I actually really like Catachans in Chimeras, because Catachans have Scout, so you give the Chimera Scout, and suddenly you've got like 20 OC in a little box just running around. Not that expensive. Like, I think a Chimera is 70, and the Guardsmen are like 55 or something.
Yeah, dirt cheap.
Yeah, like it's like 125 for a box and 20 OC inside. It's hard. So it's hard to rank here. My gut is that Guard are in B tier. I don't think that they're bad at all. I think that they have too many problematic matchups to really make a dedicated run.
Is it problematic if the army kind of tries to rush them down and kind of pins them in their deployment zone, or is it the fact that their damage output not good into certain armies?
Their damage output isn't good into certain armies. Getting lethal hits is awesome, but it's unreliable. All of their artillery is strength 8 to 10, so there's a very weird thing where Guard artillery isn't very good into like T11 plus 2-up save. There's a couple of different armies that it's just like, I don't actually do as much as like I want to do into it. And then once the artillery doesn't kill something, you're in trouble. If you can't stack your AP high enough, or if you get boxed into your deployment zone and then they put a lone op in midfield while there's a screen in like on your deployment line, you physically can't get within 12. You have no other answer there. An army that can screen out and push you in and just box you in is just like, Guard don't have the flag keyword really on anything that they're taking. Their best like mobility trick is to teleport Gaunt's Ghost after they've killed your screens.
Gotcha.
But if your screens are lone ops and the front screens die as they come in, and then reserves deep strike in, hit a charge, box you in for another turn, or if you have a lone op stratagem, anything along those lines, you can just put Guard in the corner, keep them there, and it takes too long for them to kill you, because they're not a great secondary scoring army until they have shredded all your screens and have Gaunt's Ghost in your backfield.
So a lot of more things have to go in their favor. That's not always in their control.
Yeah, that's the main thing. What scares me about Guard is not that they're a bad army. It's that there's a couple of things that I feel aren't in their control. And in a teams format, that's totally okay because it's in your captain's control. I think if we're going like, if we were doing a teams ranking, I think I would bump Guard up an entire letter here. Right now, I think they're in B. It's a good place to be, right?
Yeah,
it's good. Nothing wrong with being in B tier. I think that they can be pretty competitive. They just feel like they are one step out of their control from getting a tournament win. Like you need like that right pairings path or that right first turn combo to have a real chance to win a tournament.
Do you think there's a list that just spams the artillery?
It's they went up a lot. Again, like you're talking like the 8-piece artillery backfield that Poland had at WTC. I think that part of the list went up like 300 points. And it's a lot to cut. And we very quickly realized that if you're cutting the non-artillery, that it's all cheap, and therefore you have to cut a lot to get there. Yeah. Or you cut some of the artillery, and that's, I think, where you end up.
Probably. Just make sure you have enough board control to be doing the mission. All right, well, let's leave Guard and B tier then. We'll come back and revisit that later. Next up is Black Templars. So one of the Space Marine chapters. One of the ones that actually likes to use their own unique detachment because they can get access to a couple additional rules. Some synergize with an enhancement, some synergize with various characters and units, but the usual one is 6 of Feel No Pain, which if you take this, you can get a brick of 10 Assault Terminators to also have a 5 of Feel No Pain.
Exactly.
And that is the point where you have a 2-up save body with, T5, 4-up invuln, 4 wounds, sitting in cover, access to Armor of Contempt, 5 of Feel No Pain. It's just a bear for a lot of armies to deal with. Rapid Ingress is an amazing thing on this unit. You have access to other 2-up save bodies like Redemptor Dreadnoughts went down quite a bit, and they appreciate the Feel No Pain as well. And then they also have Sword Brethren, Crusaders. A lot of their stuff went down significantly, including their characters. So the entire packages they can bring are very cheap. And even Impulsors, 85 points. You can throw a variety of Primaris type bodies in there. And you can just flood a lot of vehicles on the board, kind of like Arks of Omen Black Templars.
Yeah, and worth mentioning, of course, that all the Black Templar vehicles, again, come with a multi-melta. Yeah. And they sometimes have their base cost adjusted, and sometimes they don't. Like a Black Templar's Impulsor is the same as a normal Impulsor, and it is a normal Impulsor plus a multi-melta. Huh, weird. Same cost. Yay, free war gear. So that's actually kind of cool. Yep. Also, the Black Templars, this is something we'll talk about with Space Marines in all chapters. Space Marines had a ton of points changes. Desolators up, Infiltrators up, other stuff down. And Black Templars specifically just weren't taking the things that went up. Because they didn't have Bolter Discipline, they weren't taking Desolators. Because it's an all-combat army made of dudes, they weren't taking as many Infiltrators. And so everything that went up wasn't a Black Templar staple. Everything that went down was things Black Templars liked. And even an actual Crusader squad, by the way, is hilariously cheap.
Yeah.
It's 125 for 10 bodies in power armor. And at the end of the day, 5 Infiltrators is 100, 10 Crusaders, just regular Crusaders with chainswords, is 125. And like, would I pay 25 points to replace my aura and all my rules with 5 more dudes?
Yep.
Probably would.
Yeah, that's a lot of screening
That's
space.
just a lot of space. That's a lot of space. So I think Black Templars are going to be relatively up there by the Space Marine standards. I think they're going to be a higher end Space Marine chapter. Do you have an opinion on a letter yet?
I'm frankly thinking towards that A tier because I think you need specific tools to be able to kill this army efficiently because it's an army that wants to dominate the center of the board, and that's where a lot of the tactical secondaries are scored. If they just dominate the center against you and you can't kill them quick enough, you are just going to fall behind on primary and also not getting a lot of your tactical secondaries. So I think they are poised to be quite strong in this new meta.
Fully agreed. I think that they also play very well into the towering nerf and some of the other changes. So I agree with A tier. I'm also going to make a quick note for the chat. We do have all of the armies images ready. Not all the images may be on the screen at the same time. So if you don't see your army, rest assured we are very likely going to rank it. We just have a couple images that are cut off by my camera.
Yep.
So don't worry, Tyranids, Tau, Thousand Suns, Votann, all of those armies will be getting ranked.
Yep, every single one.
Every single one.
Every single one with an index.
I was going to be very embarrassed if we forgot one, but I'm pretty confident we didn't.
No, we didn't.
We've done this once or twice. Yeah, so Black Templars A tier feels right. We'll kind of see where they fall into A tier once we have, kind of hit the halfway point. We'll probably re-rank things a little bit. But yeah, I think Black Templars are, at this point, I think Black Templars have the best non-Gladius build.
I 100% agree with that. It is on the more stat check side of things. But like I said, this is index hammer for the most part.
Yeah.
And if you don't have certain tools, like I'm looking at AdMech here, they realistically don't have play into Black Templars because they just cannot kill that many 2-up save things.
Yeah, and even if you
Armor
do
Protect.
have the tools to kill Black Templars, that doesn't guarantee you're going to.
Yep.
Sometimes you can if they just run straight at you. You either kill them or you don't. But, that doesn't, once you have the ability to kill 10 Terminators, that doesn't mean you now win the game. It means we're now playing a game of Warhammer.
Yep.
And we're going to check a scoreboard at the end.
Exactly. So you need to be very good with your movement, with your screening, with pushing back, slowing down their army. But that's not always an easy thing to do. And you have to build your tools in your list to do it. All right. Next up is the Blood Angels, another Space Marine chapter. One that its unique aspect is that it hits really hard in melee. And this edition as a whole is not really about melee. You don't get as many movement tricks from it, and a lot of the melee didn't get the same type of increase in its strength relative to the game's increase in durability, especially to monsters and vehicles. So melee units specifically have generally struggled unless they do something else unique or insanely durable, that type of thing, or have great OC.
I think the game is going to tilt away from the shooting level it's currently at. I don't think the needle is going to melee yet.
Yes.
Currently, right, we're imagining a fuel gauge. It was all the way on red, you are out of
Just
melee.
guns.
You need to refuel just guns. I think we're going back, but I don't think we're
Exactly.
we're perpendicular
With
to
Black
that yet.
Templars, we literally just mentioned several different combat units, all of which are quite viable. So Blood Angels, they got significant decreases all over the place to their characters, to all their key units, including Death Company, which were already quite solid.
Death Company going down is big. Sanguinary Guard, I think, is less big.
It's a little less big, but the transports going down also massively helps. The transports let this army get into the center of the table and make it hard to kill those melee elements before they can actually hit something. So I think Blood Angels are improved. I'm curious about how much they are actually improved because, like I said, their thing is melee. If you start bringing more and more guns, why aren't you playing Gladius or a different Space Marine chapter?
Yeah, and I think here that we can always look at this as Blood Angels just could do a Gladius. Even though a Blood Angel Gladius is very competitive, in my mind, because it's not even pretending to be the best way to play a Gladius, it loses some points.
Yes.
Right? And we'll get into this as well when I rank, Dark Angels, so that I don't sound hypocritical when I get there. Because Blood Angels could do a Gladius, probably are better doing a Gladius, but then they're not really bringing much to the Gladius is bringing to them.
Exactly.
I think Blood Angels still going to end up in maybe B tier. I don't think they're bad, but honestly I could even see them in C.
We could leave them in C and always bring them back up depending where the other armies are, but fundamentally they don't do anything that helps them punch up against better armies. And that's
Agreed.
my concern about them. It's similar to my concern
Agreed.
about AdMech.
Yep, and they're very oath dependent to do their damage.
Yep.
As a lot of Space Marines are, but Blood Angels don't at all build for the units that get around that problem.
Yep.
Because some armies do a little bit better than others. Yeah. So I'm okay putting them in C. Yeah, definitely ahead of AdMech. I know we're not putting them in a real order yet,
Yeah.
but like let's.
They could always end up down over here.
Yeah, we'll kind of
we'll
resort
see.
that once we see where the game's at.
But I'm very skeptical of Blood Angels, their unique Blood Angels roles being useful.
Yep.
We got Mr. John McCardell in the chat gifting 30 different memberships to our community. Thank you so much, John. Week in, week out, this man is gifting subs to our community. You are fantastic. We love you. And if you were gifted a sub, please make sure that you accept it. YouTube will send you a notification or something. You have to accept it, and then you'll get access to our awesome Discord community, as well as various other Warhammer videos.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. We really, really appreciate your support. It means the world to us. And thank you to everyone who's watching as well.
We will get to World Leaders. Don't worry. I know that's your favorite.
Every single one. We're getting to them.
All right. Chaos Knights. Here's another John army. And a mixed bag here.
Yeah.
A mixed bag. Tell us about the context of this.
Man, this is a one that is very weird to like kind of read the changes for the first time. Chaos Knights going in were about like 45% win rate.
Yeah.
They were decidedly a not bad army that no one thought was great. But they actually had some very respectable teams results. You were very mono build. It was almost always what flavor of dogs do you take? Because it was 13 dogs and you took some carnivores, or it was 14 dogs and you didn't take any carnivores. Those were the two options for Chaos Knight players. And then we got some really weird stuff from GW where even though Chaos Knights were relatively struggling as an army, they were definitely below the midline. Mm-hmm. They got points increases on, I think, 3 of their 5 Armiger profiles. But then, the most expensive one, the Carnivore, went down 20 points. Then the Rampager went down a number of points to 380. Very weird, like, mixed messages like, I don't know, GW, do you want this army to get a nerf or a buff? So I think that they ended up kind of sliding sideways as an army, and then the field shifted around them. And the field generally brought the top down more than it brought the bottom up in my mind. So I think Chaos Knights net positive out of the balanced data slate. I don't think that they got a massive boost. I think it's weird how they did Chaos Knights. Like, I don't know why they felt the need to go raise 3 of the War Dogs for an army that was solidly below, like, the middle line. But then also make other things.
Ally option.
It's maybe it's the ally option.
Yeah, I would
maybe
think
it's the paying for IK sins. I think they're a little bit overcosted, but also let's be honest here: the towering change to Chaos Knights is a buff, because Chaos Knights big boys do not shoot as hard as loyal big boys. Mm-hmm. They just don't, and it wasn't worth having towering because you would get shot by things you couldn't always kill back. So I think the towering change, buff for Chaos Knights. The Overwatch thing, a nerf if you were taking the Valiant, which means you're just not, sadly. I think Chaos Knights are going to end up as B tier at the end of that monologue. Because I think that they're going to end up as the upper end of B tier, but we can kind of sort that as we get there. I'm actually pretty excited for Chaos Knights. Mm-hmm. I think that they have potential to be better than their rules, but they're not great. They're not amazing, and they are still a knight army. They are still vulnerable to, oops, it was dense terrain and only so many units could shadows at a time. Oops, I went second and I got shot by the wrong army. Dang it, Eldar happened. And they are very mono build still. Mm-hmm. They have graduated. They're no longer just dogs. They are now either just dogs or dogs and 1 Rampager. Because the Rampager doesn't care at all about the towering change. He loves it. Yeah. And he got significantly cheaper. Enough to the point where I'd actually run one.
That's the pure melee knight?
That's the pure melee guy. And because he has a once a game advance and charge.
Nice.
He can 1 CP move through walls. He now can't be shot behind walls. Mm-hmm. So you can actually run stage this guy up and say, wow, you can't shoot the knight. By the way, once a game, he's going to go 12 plus D6 straight at you, ignoring everything in the way, and slam you. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of cool. He's less than 400 points. That's actually quite useful. So B tier feels right. I could see them sliding into the very bottom of A as we kind of rank the field, but I think B tier feels right for now.
All right. Next up, we have Chaos Space Marines, one of the armies that was kind of below that Eldar GSC tier.
Yeah.
But shoots incredibly hard. The typical list we were seeing was 2 to 3 Forge Fiends, 2 Obliterator units, Abaddon giving them full rerolls. You had Undivided all over the place for the extra damage potential. Maybe a Hellbrood around.
Yeah.
Lots of
Nurgle around for the lone op strat. Like, lots of good rules in Chaos.
Lots of fantastic rules, and then they bring in some cheap Chaos Demons allies to do mission play. But this is an army that shot one of the strongest shooting armies out there, besides GSC and Eldar. And they got some points increases. I think the Forge Fiend went up 15, Abaddon went up 30, Obliterators went up 10, but nothing dramatic. They can drop a resource in their lists, and it's still basically the same archetype that you could run. This army I still feel is quite strong. I think it is one of the best armies in the game, and now they got also a lot of points decreases to other options in their lists, and that means you don't have to rely 100% on the shooting. You can run a lot of shooting and then some tricks and
Yeah, I think what it means is that Chaos Space Marines used to be a very efficient shooting army that struggled with the mission, and that archetype went up almost 100 points between Abaddon, Forge Fiends, and Obliterators going up. And now I think you just take slightly less of the resources that went up. You still take them, right? Forge Fiends are still good. Obliterators are still good. Abaddon is still good. I think you can still take them. But now you explore, like you said, you explore some of the other options like Chosen and Rhinos with Lords. All that went down a little bit. Warp Talons went down a pretty significant amount. 100 points for a very respectable melee unit is actually kind of interesting, I think. I think Chaos Space Marines are firmly above average. I think they're going to have some flaws. But I could see them in A tier. Yeah, I think somewhere in A, top or bottom, we'll kind of figure that out.
It's one of those armies that loves the nerfs to the other top armies.
Yes.
Because they generally didn't like GSC because of the alpha that GSC could put on them potentially, and the lack of cheap, fast screens. Yeah. And then Eldar was just a problem with Wraith Knight and Night Spinners.
Eldar's still not easy.
It's still a problem.
Eldar's still a problem. But you know what? I don't think Ken usually loses to the one S tier army on the list is enough to keep an army out of A tier.
Yep. I think a lot of armies will struggle.
Yeah, everyone ranked below Eldar will struggle into Eldar. Right? Okay. That's why they're an S tier.
But I think Chaos Space Marines are at a fantastic spot, and getting some small decreases and having a lot of stuff go up or go down in their codex.
Talons. Just put 15 Warp Talons in the list. It's 100 points.
Yep, Nick is
so good.
Nick has been running them a lot in testing, and they've been performing quite well.
Yeah, Warp Talons I am 1,000% on board with.
All right, moving on to the Adeptus Custodes, the Golden Boys, the army you played to WTC. You played a lot of games. How do you feel about Custodes now? A lot of changes.
So a lot of changes. Some of them weren't to Custodes, but they still hurt. So the obvious ones is that Custodes' unit sizes got capped, and Custodes' points got hit. Basically every Custodes infantry model, every model that was wearing gold armor, now went up 5 points. And then every character went up 20 points. They just kind of blanket did that. Every infantryman up 5, every character up 20. That adds up pretty quickly. But then on top of that, they hit the unit sizes.
That's huge.
And that is that you can no longer run larger than a 5-man of Custodes Guard. Custodes went from 4, 5, 9, or 10 to 4 or 5. Wardens went from 3 or 6 to 4 or 5, which is, I don't really know why they were 3 or 6 in the first place, so whatever. And then Alloris are the same sizes, which means, ironically, the Terminators are the largest unit you can take in the army. I don't really know what was going on there, but whatever. It's totally fine. And then we have the Dev Wound changes. Custodes were unique in that they were one of the armies that was best suited to tank Dev Wounds because they have a 4 Feel No Pain against mortals. And they have a 4-up invuln. So if you hit them with a las cannon, they get a 4-up. If you hit them with the Dev Wound, they get a 4-up. And it really helped the durability of the army. Dev Wounds is now, Custodes have no defense against Dev Wounds. If you hit them with Dev Wounds, they are just taking...
-1 damage, but hope and pray that it's not volume.
Yeah, exactly. There's some things where it's super funny with warp spiders are now so good at killing Custodes. It's oh, come on. What? Did we really need this?
Yeah, or Votann Vulcanite weapons.
Oh god, yeah, there's so much pain in there. The army took pretty significant hits. The biggest problem to me is actually the unit size, because you no longer have a unit in my mind that is big enough to go take like a spot with 1 unit. It's now at the point where a 5-man with a character can randomly lose 2 or 3 guys, because that's just how the life goes when you're a Custodes player. Once you do that, 2 guys and a character no longer reliably kills anything. It should kill an intercessor squad, but you're at the point where if you roll a couple 1s and they roll an extra 5, there's a dude left. And that's a really, really awkward place to be. And then, like a small unit's hard to spend strats on. They do, of course, still have mostly battle tactics, so their character thing is not bad, because the captain can still provide a free stratagem. They have a lot of upside still. I'm going to end up, I think, putting them in B tier. I think they were very clean A towards the top of A. I honestly think they're going to end up in the lower end of B tier, but I think they are B tier.
Do you think the list just gets replaced by running as many Alaris Terminator units as possible? Because they were seeing play usually just 1 of them, sometimes 2 at max, and they with the rerolls and the blast weapon they have, they're a very good counter to some of the other armies that we might start seeing towards the top.
Yeah, the Custodes still do have options. The Land Raider went down, which was awesome, because the Custodes Land Raider is phenomenal. The Caladius did not change at all, and now there's less towering units to bully you, which is a great change. So you have quite a few good options with Custodes still, but you have less than before, and I think you struggle with quite a few matchups into higher-end armies that can kill 4 or 5 Custodes at a time. And what actually I think happens is you run into a very weird spot, where because you have smaller units, the strats are less efficient. And now, since you have less units, each character is less efficient, and then the characters went up more than the guys did. I actually think that we're at a point where you don't take that many Custodes characters anymore.
Just have more
because
units
I think a shield captain to get a -1 damage on a guard squad that's a 5-man, it's 140 points for that dude now. I think that you're actually at a point where you just run a bunch of units, and I think only Wardens and maybe 1 Alaris unit gets a character. I don't think guard get characters anymore. And you just take a bunch of 4-mans, and they just...
That's where I'm thinking, is I'm going for Wardens, I'm going for Alaris Terminators, and the guard kind of fall off because they don't do that same burst damage with all the rerolls that they used to do with the 10-man, so I don't feel like they need to be there anymore.
And the guard units, the double tap is no longer nearly as effective because you don't have as many shots. The reroll wounds is harder to get because you don't have as much OC because you're a smaller unit. And you got to a thing where 5 Custodian Guard is less than half the damage output of 10 Guard, because you're not guaranteed holding the objectives anymore. And that was a big deal, was that a 10-man just was the OC, it held the objective. And now I reroll wounds. But now 5 may not hold the objective. And then it's not rerolling wounds. And suddenly it's oh wow, without reroll wounds, this unit's not the same, and I'm paying more per model, and the captain's still kind of expensive. So I think that you pivot the build a little bit. I think you go for multiple Caladius or Land Raiders. I think you want those tanks. And then 5-mans, I think taking 4 Wardens and a Blade Champion or 5 Wardens and a Blade Champion and 1 Alaris brick is still a pretty good build. But I think B tier is where they end up.
All right. So, next up we have the Chaos Demons, an army that near and dear to Nick's heart. The typical archetype we were seeing with Demons, which was kind of one of those A-tier armies. It was up there. It had a pretty high win rate.
Had a good win rate. Had one really good build.
It was Monster Mash. It was running 5, sometimes even 6 big monsters. You were often seeing Be'lakor in there for his aura. You also saw Shalaxi. She is probably the single hardest hitting monster that demons have access to. Then you had Fate Weaver, Lord of Changes for some shooting and shenanigans. And that was the core. You ran a couple 3-man Flamer units, the Changeling, just a couple cheap resources, but it was that. You jam those monsters in the center of the table, and you overwhelm your opponent. They can't kill enough of them quick enough while you're doing damage to them with the Lord of Changes. And from there, they just kind of dominated the primary and the board. And by turn 5, if you killed all of them, okay, you just fell way behind in points. So that archetype went up a lot of points. Shalaxi went up 50, Be'lakor went up 25, the Bloodthirster went up 20.
Lord of Changes went up 30. And they were heinously on.
They went up 30. So that build alone went up significantly where you have to drop an entire monster. And at that point, do you have enough... also, their cheap resources, the Flamers, the Changeling, also went up.
Some of their stuff got cheaper.
Some of their stuff did get cheaper, though.
A lot of their trash got cheaper, and but I think it was a case of Chaos Demons were so mono build that buffing the things that didn't make the build wasn't quite enough. The buffs were not as impactful as the nerfs. So definitely a net nerf for Chaos Demons. I think that we unfortunately just crossed the line where the Monster Mash is no longer enough. I think they were over the line where it's like, yep, Monster Mash is efficient enough. I think Chaos Demons is one where they actually did a really good job of nerfing the top build. I don't think they did enough to help the second option, because now you just run a worse Monster Mash. It's kind of the way pure Demons still go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be clear, we are ranking this army based on the viability of it as a primary faction, not as an ally. Because I think Chaos Demons are an awesome ally still.
Oh yeah, automatic.
But let's be clear, we are ranking primary faction Demons and the Demon Detachment by themselves. I don't know. I have a feeling we're going to end up in C here.
C, you think they drop that low?
I think so.
Really?
I'm just looking at the armies above them. And I know we're not ranking side to side, but I'm looking at the 3 armies in B tier. And I'm very confident that all of those are better than Demons. Not maybe they're a little better. No, those are better than Demons.
So you think they're going to be down here towards the top of C tier? Because their rules are still better than what you have down here. The unique rules that they gained. But at the same time, they are mostly a stat check army. They don't have a lot of synergy outside of my opponent can't deal with me quick enough. But I think they have enough cheap resources to play the mission. Maybe they go for I do a lot of move blocks, I do a lot of just mission play, and maybe I have 1 or 2 hard-hitting pieces that come down out of Shadows of the Warp to do damage, and they just pivot. But we'll have to see. I kind of lean towards, they're probably going to struggle into the mid-tier armies now, who can kill 2 monsters, 3 monsters in the early game. And then at that point, you just completely run out of steam.
Exactly, yeah. Once you start losing multiple monsters. I also think that Bellacor's ability is less important now because there's no Towering Alpha Strike. And then Be'lakor went up. So it's do you actually take Be'lakor? Because the way that this is trending, I feel like a lot of enemies are willing to get within, 18 to shoot? Yeah, I feel 18. Like more armies currently than previously are willing to just be like, oh, I have to go within 18 to shoot you? 17.9, you're dead.
Yeah, one of the problems they have is that the stuff that wants to survive on objectives is also their key damage dealers. Yeah. And generally, you want to have them... You want your opponent to commit their damage into something you're okay if it dies. It just needs to take extra units to die. And then you hit them with the damage dealers. But their non-damage dealers aren't very durable. Maybe Pink Horrors will see a resurgence. We'll have to see. I know Nick has mentioned the name before. But, okay, let's leave them down towards C. That's quite a drop for them.
Yeah, I think they went from A to C. I think they took that top build and really hurt it. And then, even though they buffed everything that wasn't part of it, they didn't raise it to that level. It's just there were some things that were so radically, different price. You could look at, old points. A Lord of Change versus a unit of Nurgle. Insert any unit in Nurgle at all. And it's all right, what are we doing here? Would I rather have, a Lord of Change or if you look at the rate 14 Plague Bears, those were the same cost. It's okay, you just take the Lord of Change, and now it's now you can get 20 Plague Bears instead of a Lord of Change, and you would still just rather have a Lord of Change.
That's fair. Okay, let's leave Demons there. They could always make it up to the bottom of B.
They really could. They really could.
Now, Dark Angels. This is an army that you love. How do you feel about Dark Angels in the new meta?
I love them so much.
No.
I am very hyped for Dark Angels. I think Dark Angels are in a fantastic spot right now. So in my mind, Dark Angels are really I think that they're the best Gladius. I know we haven't ranked Space Marines yet, so I'm jumping the gun a little bit. I think Dark Angels, their Unforgiven Task Force, is actually really cool. I think it is not the same as the Gladius Task Force. And you just accept that, and you say, yes, Dark Angels are best as a Gladius. And this is different than Blood Angels being best as a Gladius, because Dark Angels add things to that. Because you get to say, oh, I'm just going to run a normal Gladius Task Force list and slam 10 Deathwing Knights in. I am adding something that the Gladius wishes it had. I am adding units better than the units that were in the Space Marine Codex. A lot of their other stuff got cheaper. No changes to the Deathwing Knights. They stayed the same. Fair enough. They didn't deserve a points drop. But Talon Masters down is really nice.
Everything.
Ravenwing Bikes and Command Squads down. Deathwing Terminators and Command Squads down. All the characters Azrael down. Azrael's a really good Chapter Master. In a CP-starved world, he's 105 to give a unit of 4 pinball and sustained hits once a game before it pin against mortals, and +1 CP every turn, and he also shoots and punches.
How many points is he?
105.
Wow.
Azrael's really good. Azrael in the 10 Hellblaster Brick, it's actually kind of legit right now.
Call it 185. Makes me cry.
Punk. Yeah, I'm high on Dark Angels right now. What I think you can look at is the Polish WTC list. Kudos to them. I believe Lesu ran 10 Deathwing Knights, 6 Aggressors with both their Discipline and Land Raider Redeemer. That archetype just went down in points. Yeah. It was a good list. It was good enough to have a 1-loss performance on the top finishing team at WTC. And, that's a great showing on a team that, had to play the best to get there. So, he didn't have an easy strength of schedule. Yeah. Like, even if you don't look at what he played. His 1 loss was to double Wraith Knights, a thing we're no longer as worried about.
Acceptable.
Acceptable, right? Like, no shade on that. My 1 loss was to the same list. So, fair enough. But that list just got cheaper. Because the Dark Angel list, when you build that Terminator brick in, wasn't taking Desolators. Because you didn't want to have 2 units that cost more than 400 points. You don't need that in an army. So, now we're just like, oh, I'm not taking the thing that got nerfed. I am taking the things that got cheaper. And then the game just slid a letter down around me. I think Dark Angels are not only A, I think they're top of A.
Top of A?
I think they're ahead of Black Templars. I think they're ahead of CSM. We can, at least they're top of the current A. We can look at who else is near them, but I think Dark Angels are like legitimately fantastic right now.
Well, I am excited to see it on the table because, man,
hype, Dark Angel hype.
Yeah, I mean, I know how strong Gladius is, and the fact that they got those decreases everywhere. How many unique Dark Angel units are you running here besides the Deathwing Terminators and Azrael?
None.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's other Space Marine guns.
It's. Unfortunately, I think Dark Angels are at their best as we are an upgrade to the Space Marine Codex, not a fully unique Dark Angel build. With that said, I think it's really good. Okay. And as unfortunate as it is to say, we're talking top-end competitive, not let me just do what I can with Dark Angels, like with the Unforgiven Task Force, which I think the Unforgiven Task Force would still be in, B tier. It's still pretty dang good. But best Dark Angels is Gladius with Deathwing Knights. And that's top Dark Angels. That's the Dark Angels I would take to a tournament if I was playing Dark Angels right now. As a matter of fact, I might have bought a Land Raider Redeemer recently just to make sure I could do this.
All right. Next up, we have the Death Guard.
Death Guard!
So we've been looking at a lot of armies that kind of went down a little bit, some that stayed relatively the same. But then we haven't seen any that are dramatic improvements besides maybe Dark Angels, but even then they were still a pretty good army. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was dramatic. Death Guard are dramatic. So we personally felt that they were the worst army in the game, not because of their win rate. Their win rate was actually higher than you would expect. It was 44, 45%. It was just
40-something. Higher than I thought.
Higher than a bunch of factions. But Death Guard are a slow army, and it's the opposite of Eldar. Eldar, with their speed, with their tricks, gives you plays when you otherwise wouldn't have any. Death Guard doesn't have any of that. They have basically a slow army that's trundling up the board and hopes that you don't shoot it too hard before it gets there. And you don't have many screens to push it back. Yep. So, what did Games Workshop do to Death Guard? Well, their points are dropped everywhere. Huge point decreases 100%. To pretty much everything. They're gaining 300 points in their lists, or even more if you're running a lot of the stuff that went down significantly. And then they gained an entire new rule on top of their regular army one. So Contagion was, if you're in Contagion range, -1 toughness, which in an edition where a lot of things gained quite a bit of toughness, isn't so impactful. Yeah. However, they now have an impactful rule to spread the sickness, and that is you get to pick one of 3 things before each game you play. So in a tournament, you can be flexible and switch between them in different rounds. So one of them is -1, if you're in Contagion range, if the enemy unit's in Contagion range, it's -1 to their OC, to a minimum of 1. If it was to a minimum of 0, it would be ludicrously strong. Of course, yeah. And then -1 leadership. So if you do battle shocks and such, this is a helpful thing. This is one of the more niche ones. The other 2 are quite strong. One is -1 ballistic skill and weapon skill on the target. And let's say Death Guard have a bunch of ways to get -1 to hit, either through stealth or various other abilities.
You get some real good jank in there.
When you -1 to their ballistic skill and then throw -1 to hit on there, those do stack. Minuses to hit don't, but minus to your ballistic skill characteristic, and then a -1 to hit on top of that, all of a sudden you're -2 to where you otherwise would have been. It's very strong, and especially the weapon skill one, there's not a lot of bonuses to weapon skill or rerolls in combat. There's very few compared to 9th edition.
If you can get -1 to hit and -1 weapon skill stacked, it is hilarious. Yeah. And you can get a custodian. I think Typhus's unit is -1 to hit. So if you get a custodian hitting Typhus on 4s. And custodians don't have rerolls. It's oh wow. I'm just suddenly the custodians player is I have never experienced this before.
Exactly. What is this? On top of that, the third one is -1 to the save characteristic. Ludicrous. Ludicrous.
Pretty good.
Death Guard an army that has a lot of AP1, AP2,
Yep.
and not too many ways to ignore cover. But then all of a sudden now they're -1 to your opponent's saving throw, and it's a huge deal because it can bring units to 3-up save characteristic, and then cover isn't going to bring them back to a 2-up.
Yeah, you got to the point where a 2-up save, like Terminator, in cover with Armor of Contempt was just, you were never breaking through it.
Yep.
And now you're like, surprise, you're actually a 3-up save, nothing is saving you from the fact that 2s fail. There's no amount of cover and Armor of Contempt you can stack. I'm not even going to spend my CP for +1 AP. Just whatever, we're done. Take 3-ups instead of 2-ups. That's it. I mean, like, imagine, like, you can just, because I'm pretty sure you can get AP on the Flamers very easily for Death Shrouds. So you can very easily just go, oh, your Custodes are now taking 3-up saves, and now 1 AP ignore cover. Cool, 4-ups on the Custodes, not doing anything else. Have fun.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Chad is mentioning Typhus. Typhus is a beat stick and a synergy buff. You can do a lot of damage out of nowhere, and we've seen that in multiple games so far.
Yeah.
I know that you played against him
I had a
with your Tyranids.
a very close game into Death Guard with my Tyranids.
Yep.
So Death Guard used to be in D for Death Guard tier. That's spoiling
They
it
owned
too
that
much.
tier.
They owned it. Like,
were
I
the
think
kings.
they spent like 4 consecutive tier lists in D for Death Guard tier.
Yeah.
And you know what? Also, I would like to point out that the chat has been more active for us talking Death Guard than any other army so far. Yeah. I love that the Death Guard community is so committed to their army because a weak-minded person would abandon that army very quickly and only come back right now.
Yeah, exactly.
A weak-minded person would do that.
If we start seeing Nick playing Death Guard in the near future, then all of
Absolutely.
a sudden we know.
Then we know. But like Quentin did join Death Guard while they were down.
He had to suffer against my Votann list, all my bad armies into his Death Guard.
Yeah. With that said, Death Guard, I'm not sure where to put them. They have fundamental problems still. They are much improved. But they were the worst army in the game by our estimation. So much improved from the bottom of the barrel does not take you to the top of the barrel.
No.
I'm not sure if they're going to end up in B or C.
So I think that personally, with the kind of the amount of units that you can put on the board, this army is quite annoying to deal with. I think they will struggle specifically into armies that have a lot of fast screens. Because if they want to run Terminators or any of the slower moving things, they have to basically rapid ingress them into the center of the table.
Yeah.
And good fast screens will push them back. They're not insanely durable, they just have a lot of stuff. Mortarion, like his durability is quite solid, especially for his points, but it's not world-ending durability. It's not like the Black Templars up here. Their synergies are very good. Hellbrutes being able to hit a unit and put it in contagion range is amazing, but at the same time, you do that once and then it gets shot and dies. So I think that they're probably going to be towards the upper end of C, lower B. I think the speed is what's going to kill them.
They're going to be right on that line. I think that they're improved enough that they are better than several armies in the game right now. They're no longer in danger of being the bottom.
Their army rule is very good now.
Yes.
That synergy that you have there with Spread the Sickness is very strong.
Their data sheets are kind of bad.
Yeah.
And they got a lot cheaper, so you can fit a lot more bad data sheets in, and that does help a ton, Ask Sisters. But the data sheets still aren't good, and the speed problem is a real thing. I will point out, though, that Mortarion genuinely might be one of the best named characters in the game.
Yep.
That guy is crazy for his points.
Aura
cost.
of ignoring modifiers to your characteristics is very strong, especially when surrounded by some Plague Burst Crawlers.
And then he gets to choose another war. It's like oh, wow.
Yep.
Good for Mortarion. I think we can slot them at top of C for now. They're one of those armies that's on the line. Like, it's entirely possible that Death Guard sneak up a little bit. Mm-hmm. But they definitely are ahead of where they were. I personally think that I love what GW has done here, which they saw an army that was languishing, and they gave them a significant rules and points buff. I genuinely think that in 3 months, next Minotaur Field Manual or whatever, I genuinely think that Death Guard should get another buff.
Yep.
But I love that they took a real shot at improving the army instead of just, like, I don't know, make everything go down 5 points and we'll check back in a year. Like, they took a real shot at trying to improve Death Guard here, and I genuinely appreciate that because that army needed love. And I'm glad that GW actually took time to give them a completely new mechanic. I don't think Death Guard are in the current roadmap. I'm not aware of Death Guard coming anytime soon.
I don't believe so.
So they will probably be sticking around with this rule set for at least a little bit, which is probably why they went out of their way to be like, all right, let's give them a real buff that's going to stick. And good for them.
Yeah, I think the next step is that there's a lot of data sheets similar to AdMech that just don't do enough for what if you keep reducing their points, they just become a spam army.
Yeah.
And Death Guard really shouldn't be. They're still a Marine at its base.
Death Guard shouldn't be 60 Plague Marines.
I'd rather the next time around, because they probably will need some targeted buffs to some of these weaker units, change the datasheet rule. I would like to see that.
I would love to... I think there's...
For other armies, too.
Yeah. The Death Guard is definitely one that needs that. But at least they took a really solid first step by fixing Death Guard. You don't have to take an army from bottom to S tier on the first pass. That's a horrible idea. Yeah. But give it a real shot, get it up towards that middle, see how the win rate goes, see if they need another buff.
Yep.
That's good.
And once again, being in C doesn't mean you're just completely terrible and can't play into any of this.
True, yeah.
It means you have play into this. It's harder. You have to outplay your opponent. But at the same time, you have some tools that let you do that. All right. Deathwatch.
Woo!
Talk about an army out of nowhere, just boom. Games Workshop brought the heavy Thunderhammer, not the Thunderhammer, the heavy Thunderhammer, the two-handed one, and just hit the Deathwatch. Now, Deathwatch had some problematic interactions. They immediately nerfed the mortal potential with the
They
mortals.
just immediately killed that day one. Fair enough. That should not have been in the game. No problem.
Then they had Desolation Marines that were wounding your opponent on 2s, Oath of Moment full rerolls to hit wounds. It was problematic. They also were one of the faster Marine armies because of the ability to go back into reserve, come down. And their Proteus kill team was extremely efficient and more durable than it should be for its points. So they had some very good units. Points increases on all of that. Desolation Marines yeeted into the sky. 5-man units, okay, gone out of here. And then you have the Proteus kill team. The regular kill teams went up a decent amount of points. And then the rules change, which was there's 3 stratagems that they have, the different types of rounds. They used to work on any of the weapons, so Desolation Marines, your assault cannons, your frag cannons, the good weapons. Now they only work on specifically bolt weapons. There's some good ones, like Aggressors with their Bolt Storm gauntlets, but there aren't that many of them. And because all 3 only interact with that, it's a big deal. On top of that, I don't remember which of their stratagems specifically is battle tactic, but they can't just make any of them free.
Basically Armor of Contempt. Because all the bolt ones are Warrior, the teleport one is like an epic deed. I think Armor of Contempt is their only battle tactic.
Okay.
I'd have to double check that, frankly.
Is go back into reserve strategic ploy?
I think it's strategic ploy.
Yeah. So like a lot of their shenanigans were that they could do awesome things with multiple kill teams, and that's going to cost more. Yep. You don't have as many CP to keep spending on synergies.
Yeah. The stratagems restricting the weapons targetable at the same time. That hurt. I love Deathwatch. I painted up the whole army. I was so excited for them.
John had painted it up so I could play it.
I was so mad.
And
I think we genuinely got to the point where Deathwatch took the hardest hit in the game.
They very well might have.
I can't think of an army that got hit harder than Deathwatch.
Just look at the list that existed, but that was their strong archetype, and just eviscerate.
And then like look at the changes you have to make.
Yeah.
Like look at the top build for any army a month ago and look at it now. Deathwatch is unrecognizable.
Yep.
I'm really, really sad about this one. I think Deathwatch got a really big hit. The main thing is that the unique units the main problem is that Deathwatch, their stratagem output didn't even get halved, it got quartered. Because not only are half of their stratagems now borderline useless, well, the three of their best ones, then also they can't do the free stuff. Then their list went up in points. And it's very hard to find an identity now because all those expensive kill teams going up in points, not getting the output buffs, you start to wonder because, we were at a point where a Proteus kill team was 330 and like a Terminator unit was like 400.
Yeah.
A Proteus kill team with 3 assault cannons is now 360.
Yep.
10 Terminators with 2 assault cannons is 380. Am I really paying for those frag cannons? Like, am I going 20 points cheaper to have a couple of frag cannons instead of everyone is a Terminator? I don't know. Because, at least the Terminators with bolt weapons can still do, like, some stratagems, whereas there's no stratagems to buff that. You just have teleport armor contempt. And if you run the Deathwatch unit, because that's what kills me, is that now the Deathwatch stratagems don't want to be used on the Deathwatch units. And not only did they hit the army competitively, I feel like they took the flavor of Deathwatch and put it in a dumpster. Deathwatch were too strong. I'll admit it. I love Deathwatch. I'm not going to say that they didn't deserve a nerf. I'm not going to lie to people and say that. However, we are now at I think Deathwatch, where it was, genuinely felt like what I envisioned Deathwatch, which is you actually take the models, you actually take the kill teams. You teleport around, you're an elite army that hits really hard in a spot and is very specialized. And that was awesome. It was too good. Points changes very deserved. I honestly think Deathwatch would have been fine with just the points changes and the Desolator changes. Because that list going up 150 points and losing the Desolators is a real nerf.
Yep.
But...
Yeah. The other thing is, Games Workshop mentioned a couple things are being legends. Some of like the classic Marine things.
Yeah.
And the Land Speeder actually has an amazing rule where if it if it's looking at an enemy unit, yep, your blast weapons, which i.e. the frag cannons, get ignores cover and +1 to hit, which was really nice. So losing some extra tools is going to be quite annoying. The Hailstrike went up as well, which is getting extra AP for these units.
That was really important.
So I definitely think Deathwatch is quite hard hit.
Yeah,
here.
and the nerf there of the Legends units hasn't hit yet. We don't have a street date yet for the Space Marine Codex, so right now we're going without the Space Marine Codex.
Yeah, but I'm saying like
but the fact that we have Deathwatch getting just like on their knees trying to hold their guts in, and like GW whispers, sometime later this year you're using your units as they like walk past. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Like, why do we know there's a nerf coming for Deathwatch as they're getting dragged?
And it doesn't hit many of the other ones, but specifically
Deathwatch just loved those units. I think Deathwatch are C tier. I don't know where yet we can look at that. It's a big drop. I thought that they were upper A tier, and I think that they have dropped 2 letters. The main problem that I have with Deathwatch is that it's so different and hard to build a list right now that is trying to be Deathwatch. Because now it literally is, you either use Deathwatch rules or you take Deathwatch units. Because the Deathwatch units are now bad in a Black Spear detachment. I'm like, how did we get to the point that you don't want Deathwatch units in a Deathwatch army? Like, how did we get here? Like, you get 6 sweet stratagems. 3 of them don't apply to any kits that actually are Deathwatch. Like, you kidding me? Hey, what are we doing?
Those visual bolt guns, baby. Popping off.
Yeah, like I can get +1 AP on my devastating wound guns. Like, oh, okay.
I think it's going to be a pivot. I think there's probably going to be like a team's Deathwatch list that runs the aggressors and has like a really good anti-Necrons matchup, or some of the other potential horde-based armies. But I think into the overall meta, they really don't do as much unique as probably, say, a Black Templars or a Dark Angels.
Yeah. There's a really unfortunate thing where I'm looking at, would I take a Deathwatch army in a Gladius and put Bolt or Discipline on a kill team? And I'm just so sad to think about that. Genuinely though, I think if we're going like a Gladius of Deathwatch, it's probably bottom of B tier. But like, oh man, they took some hits.
They're still tricky Marines.
They're still, like, objectively, like, I think what you could honestly do is you could put a big Proteus kill team, just one, with a character,
Watchmaster,
with Bolt or Discipline. Honestly, you probably do like a Lieutenant with Bolt or Discipline, because I'm pretty sure Lieutenant can join there. And then you just send it. Right? You just say, okay, actually, no, I don't even think you can put a Lieutenant in there. Oh my god. Right, you find a character that can go in the Proteus kill team.
I'll advance and shoot.
No, I think you put it in either a Rhino or you put it in a Corvus Blackstar.
Oh, the regular kill team.
Yeah, no. Oh yeah, a regular kill team in a Rhino or a Proteus in a Blackstar.
Yeah. And
you just deliver that at point blank range in rapid fire and say, screw it, we're going full Devastator Doctrine +1 AP, ignore cover, and everything. And that is going to hit like a mule. They are still Space Marines. I just think that the flavor of the army has been gutted, and they're now just... I think that they're better as a Gladius than a Black Spear, and that is a tragedy. Because not only did they make the army worse, they killed the unique flavor of it, and we're now another way to play the Gladius. I hate seeing the armies lose flavor when they get nerfed. Like, please keep the fun bits and nerf the strength. Don't do it the other way around.
Like Eldar, you got to keep Phantasm. That's just one of the most fun things.
No, you can keep Fire and Fade. Eldar can keep Fire and Fade. That is a core Eldar stratagem. I hate it, but it can stay there.
All right. So moving on to Drukhari here. So this is an army that was probably like 43, 46. It was on the bottom half. It was
bottom half for sure.
And it was an army that you saw the most play in Ynnari lists because they would grab Drukhari Ravagers, which were 95 points for 3 Dark Lances, and in Ynnari they get the rerolls without Aeldari. Now they went up, I believe, 20 points So they're a
Ravagers went up.
bit more expensive. Scourges and some of the other unique Drukhari things did go down. Lelth, Hesperax went down a nice amount. Incubi went down. So the transports didn't, though. So you're basically getting more specialty units into your list. But if you took Triple Ravager, which probably most Drukhari lists did, and then you take a couple, one or two of these units that went down, you're basically kind of in the same spot. Their army rule with the pain tokens and the chronos regenerating them is solid. Like, I would kill for that. I would throw away all of AdMech's rules and just grab that if I could. But at the same time, their stuff just doesn't hit that hard. A couple splitting up to Cabalite warrior units, putting all the special weapons into a raider, and then using the ping token to reroll all the hits with the firing deck. It's solid. It is definitely solid. But this army is pretty paper thin. There's nothing, even Talos just aren't that durable compared to the durable stuff in the meta and the guns that are being brought to kill durable stuff. And then on top of that, their combat, which used to be their unique thing, they were able to easily contest objectives and get all over the board and be tricky. They don't really have that. They're mostly a shooting army. So I personally have found that they don't really hold the middle of the board well, and their shooting, while solid enough with pain tokens, isn't enough to make sure that you do the crippling damage that you need to if you commit your army.
Their durability is very low still, which is thematic for Drukhari, but they're no longer delivering into combat and killing you.
And they don't have a crazy amount of stuff. They have a good amount of units, but not insane amounts.
Yeah, not enough that you can just throw away all your lance units, kill something, die back, and say we're good here. It's not that critical mass. This is an army that we think the win rate is just not representative.
Not the RTT win rate.
Yeah, they had a 70% win rate last weekend. That is very impressive. But I don't believe it. I think it's they had a good weekend. Skari probably won an RTT.
Skari went to 7 different RTTs.
Yeah, won all of them. Cool. But even though Drukhari a fast army always has the ability to outplay certain things. But I just don't think that the army is good at beating any equal skill games, ever. I think Drukhari are still C tier. I don't think they're dropping to D. They're not that bad. But Drukhari's melee options, there. That's where I'm feeling. Maybe below Blood Angels, I'm not really sure. They really are just... The Ravager nerf is such a, sorry about Eldar thing. Because they could have raised the points on Yvrain, and that means that, right? They put up Ravagers 20 points, so now you can't bring as many Ravagers in Eldar. They could have just raised Yvrain so that didn't happen. Instead, they chose the Ravager, a thing that kind of needed to be cheap for Drukhari to function.
Or I would just put in a Ynnari points for things.
They did that last edition, right? They could have just added the Ravager to the Ynnari thing at a different points cost. Because, hey, if you change the army's rule, maybe you can get a different points cost. That feels fair. They did that for, the Space Marine armies and Chaos Legions.
Yep.
Skari legit did win an RTT this last weekend. Skari, what a hero. I think Drukhari just have so many fundamental problems still. That you can win with them. You win with them by actively outplaying your opponent, which is, legit. But I just think that the ability for Drukhari to win a large event is very low right now.
Absolutely.
That's my unfortunate fear with them.
All right, next up, Grey Knights. So Grey Knights were one of the armies that got huge point decreases, including on their critical important units. So Paladins went down 60 points. They went down 6 points a model. The Terminators also went down. It's 420 now for a 10-man unit, and that was one of their best units. All their infantry went down pretty much. The characters went down a nice amount. So Grey Knight lists were getting 250 or so points back.
A lot of points back.
A lot. So you can just fit in. You can take the triple Terminator build with the 3 characters and assassin, and then just add in 2 strike squads, get sticky objectives, and 2 more resources to contest objectives. So that's quite strong. The vehicles went down a bit, but their data sheet just doesn't do enough. It's unreliable. It's still pretty pricey for what you get. And I don't feel like they went down enough to really open up a different build. So, in my opinion, you either have an MSU style, you take Rhinos, 5-man Interceptors, Purifiers, all that stuff, and just throw out a lot of 2-up save bodies all over the table, and try and use their 3.1 away and great stratagems and rules to just play the mission the whole time. Grey Knights are one of the armies that can absolutely just do fixed if they want to, and not even worry about having to kill people off objectives and such, and just try and contest them away. But you could also run the 30 Terminator variant, which I think is significantly stronger because you have these extra resources now.
Yeah, we had Jack's WTC list that he was doing shockingly well with, considering where the army was in terms of, both public opinion and win rates. That army did very well. I think that list specifically gained like 180, 190.
Yeah, it's around 200.
It gained a significant amount. Just to replace your exaction squad with something else cheap like an Inquisitorial Henchman squad.
No, you don't even need that. Just 2 strike squads in there, and then they get to use Grey Knight rules, and they're quite durable.
That's pretty good too.
Yep.
I think Grey Knights are quite improved. Do we think they're up to A tier?
So here's their fundamental weakness, right?
Yep.
It is that they just don't do that much damage. You can bring librarians, which help. Because they can pop off a bunch of mortals. Feel no pain against mortal wounds is a lot less valuable now because of the dev wounds change, so people won't be teching for it as hard, and we'll see where Thousand Suns land because they used to be one of the absolute top armies as well that you had to be worried about. So because of that, I think librarians help add that extra dimension to Grey Knights and up their damage output, but it's still not consistent damage, and it's still not long range. I'm just blowing people up. You can run Land Raiders. I still don't think that really fits with what Grey Knights want to do because they don't interact with their key rules.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that they're in the B tier. I think they have amazing rules. They can just not do enough in a turn or lose too many models. And we're going to see a couple of the top armies have the damage output. Once they burn through the sigil, they can actually kill half or more of a Terminator brick in one go. And at that point, that's a crippled unit. Yes, it can heal back a model in the command phase. There's also some army that we're going to see that can have the OC to contest objectives against them. I do believe Grey Knights are one of the few armies that will be good in, if you run that variant, that particular list, actually has a positive matchup into Eldar.
Yeah, I fully believe that. Too much of the A tier feels like it could be Grey Knights.
It could be Grey Knights because they also, Black Templars, Chaos Space Marines, Dark Angels, want to get towards the center of the table and then bring outrageous amounts of shooting. Okay, you burn the sigil, but then you're just there if you try and hold the objectives.
Yeah.
So that's my concern about Grey Knights. You can't easily make the... they changed the type, the stratagem that made it so you can't target them within 12. They changed its type to strategic ploy.
So it's not battle tactics?
Exactly. So part of the key strategy was making that free. I think Grey Knights are a very strong army that can punch up into Eldar even.
Woo!
But that's specifically because they don't need to do damage into Eldar. They just have to dominate the primary and kill all those T3 bodies. Eldar are one of the armies that wants to spam T3 infantry, and Grey Knights are actually good at killing that very efficiently.
Yeah, they really are.
But they can struggle against like a Chaos Knight build that gets on the objectives first and starts blocking it up with a ton of OC and relatively durable bodies. That's annoying for Grey Knights to deal with. Necrons, they put 20 warriors all over the objectives with OC3 from the command barge. That's annoying. It's not impossible. They can get there first and do it. But I think it's not entirely in your hands.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. I think Jack would rate them A tier.
I can see very top of B. I'm not going to accept middle of B. I can see very top of B. I'm leaning towards bottom of A, but top of B, bottom of A. We can put them in either one and kind of relook at this. I'm not fussed between bottom of A and top of B. I do think that they are firmly above the midpoint. I can see bottom of A, honestly. Like we can always adjust them back down to top of B if we feel towards the end, but I'm kind of feeling them where they are.
All right, let's leave them up there. But they're very high skill cap. So as soon as you start making mistakes with how few resources they have, your army starts to fall apart. So you just can't make any mistakes.
Yep.
I'm just worried about their shooting into more durable armies. They're not going to kill enough, and they're going to take that firepower after the sigil's burned.
Yeah, there are a couple things. Also, I actually think that the game getting slightly more melee focused is not good for them because they were already losing shootouts because their shooting damage is anemic. I feel like Grey Knights kind of thrived off of being like a very hard to interact with army that's just like running around and just you can't quite get there and they can tag you, then they can move back and you can never really deal with them. And now if you just put an army that's better than in melee than them, you can just run it forward. And if the Grey Knights leave, you just stay on the objectives and say, oh man, there's nothing to punch on these objectives, which means I'm the only one here.
So the MSU style definitely has some play. We'll have to see that one. But I think the Terminators are the one that lets you punch up at least because if they just survive and keep OCing the objectives, you get way ahead because your secondary game's amazing now.
Yep.
All right, Genestealer Cults.
Ooh.
So this army took quite a few nerfs, an army rule nerf, points nerfs to pretty much every key
Yeah.
unit.
More nerfs than Aeldari.
Yep, they absolutely more nerfs than Aeldari. More
Who didn't
impactful
really,
ones.
you know?
So, do you want to break this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So Genestealer Cult was an army we had in S tier. I don't think they're going to be there anymore, but let's kind of talk about how far they've fallen. So what changed with GSC was their points and their comeback ability. So when you kill a GSC unit, they no longer come back for free without rolling dice. Cool, that's nice. Instead, it's a 5+, +1 if the unit that was destroyed is battle line, +1 if it's battle round 1 or 2. So you get the point where an Acolyte or Neophyte squad is always on a 4+, and then early game a 3+. And then an Aberrant squad is always a 5+, early game a 4+. That's pretty good still. It's a pretty good rule. You're going to get some amount of units back, just no longer everything. I love this change. Yes, it's a bit of a feel bad when the GSC player hits or fails all of their dice rolls, but frankly, a lot of top-end Genestealer Cult players would tell me, and I would agree, that, oh yeah, the comeback ability doesn't matter because I use each unit once in my opponent's table. And that's still a thing. And they went up, I think most GSC lists went up in the ballpark of like 200-ish.
Yep, 200.
Sometimes a little under, sometimes a little over, depending on what it is. Basically, they can cut like a unit.
A brick.
A brick. Like, not a small unit. They can cut a real legitimate unit out of their list and be about there. Maybe they fiddle a point, they cut an enhancement. Maybe they cut Vect, because that was like a 30 or 40 point enhancement. Cut that and a unit, and then have like basically the same character count, just one less unit, and you're there. You're at 2K now. GSC are still really dang good because one unit less does not stop them from fundamentally punching you in the face.
Yes.
And if you get lined up on by a GSC army and they get to execute their drop turn the way that they would like to, most armies don't care about what comes back because the game is over.
Yes, you've just lost too much.
Yeah, GSC are still very capable of that. They're still hard-hitting enough. Now, if you know how to play against GSC, if you've got some infiltrator tech, if you've got the decision points, you've practiced it, you can beat GSC. It's much easier to beat them than before if you're prepared. But they still absolutely have that, oh, you thought we were gone? Surprise! Boom. Infiltrators went up and you replaced them with Tactical Marines? Idiot. Bang. Like, that's
3.1 away.
Yeah, 3.1 away, the game's over.
So,
like, no amount of defense saves you from what's coming right now. Face punch.
Yeah, I think the one thing that'll keep GSC up towards the top end here is because they still have outrageous damage output.
Oh my god, they do.
Because their two key damage dealing strats, I believe, are both battle tactic, so they can still use the Nexus ability on them to reduce them. You can't do double, I come 3.1 away, or double, I go back into reserve, so there's less shenanigans with that. It is going to be more like the style Jack played in 9th edition, where it's just about the damage. I'm going to come down, cripple you on that turn, and you won't have enough to kill me after that. Yeah. Quick enough.
I don't love the fact that they did points changes instead of damage changes. I actually really wish that they had kept the points very similar to where they are now, like slight increases, but just slight, and then gone in and done something to the actual like damage profiles.
They're coming down. +1 ballistic skill, ignores cover, sustained hits, full rerolls from the Primus, +1 to wound. Possibly rerolling ones to wound if they're the Acolyte hybrids.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, at that point, I actually take an obscene amount of damage.
Oh, and ignore cover.
Yeah, I did mention.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay,
and,
perfect.
On top of that, you're fishing for with the full rerolls, those sustained. It's an absurd amount of damage that you can potentially take.
I really wish that they'd like replaced sustained hits with something else. Like maybe replace sustained with lethal. Maybe take the Primus to like reroll ones.
Reroll ones to hit and wound.
Yeah, something like that.
Don't make him 90 points. Make him like
Keep
him relatively
honestly,
cheap.
Primus goes down 10 points and his reroll ones to hit.
Yeah,
make him cheap, no problem. And then like the army doesn't have to go up in points. I love GSC, like the look of a GSC army. It just still hits too hard.
Yeah.
So
one of the things you want to look for when you do something like this, change a fundamental army roll and points increases, is that if you hit them too hard, you need to open up a different playstyle, and there's no additional playstyle here. The transports didn't go down, other stuff didn't go down, which is fine because they're being cautious.
Detachment for that. That's a codex thing.
Exactly. So they just do the same thing. They have less stuff. They're less reliable in coming back, but they can hit you like a ton of bricks if you don't have screens.
Yeah. I honestly, if I had a choice, I would say change the sustained hits thing to lethal, and then take the bombs from D6 +3 to D6. Just take the +3 off of the gun.
Yeah.
And just call it a day. And then you only need like very minor points changes, and you still change the comeback to life thing. That needed to change still. I think GSC are solidly A tier.
Me too.
They're still really good.
If you mess up against them, you're going to get punished hard, and you could just lose the game.
Yeah.
They are still one of the armies that can be just like, oh, you made a couple tiny mistakes, you are done.
Yeah.
Get out of the game. Now they're much more challenging to play because you don't get your key units back. So you have to be a little bit more thoughtful in how you place them. But I still think a top player can do a lot with this army.
Yeah. I mean, put him like in the middle.
Yeah.
Looks at. Do you want to kind of reshuffle things in order now, or do you want to like? At this point, do you want to just like knock it out and do it at the end?
Yeah, let's just knock it out at the end.
Let's do it.
And then we'll see the full context.
Okay.
All right. Imperial Knights, another army that you love. However,
I love it.
I think they got a similar type of Deathwatch type.
Yeah, it felt like they took that treatment. So Imperial Knights had very minor point adjustments, which I'm grateful for. The armigers went up a little bit. Unfortunate. Okay. The towering change is real. It's not as big of a nerf as it sounds, though, in my opinion, because it does stop Knights from being alpha struck. Knight big boys shoot significantly harder than Chaos Knight big boys, and then most Titanic units. Not the Wraith Knight, but it's Wraith Knight, then all the Imperial Knights, then every other towering thing. So the towering change means Knights are much worse at pulling off an alpha strike and less likely to get alpha struck. So they're a lot less first turn dependent, which I love that as a change. I think the towering change was just fantastic for the game, including for Knight armies. Love that. Then Knights took a real big hit on their rule. So Knights, their thing, like the special rule that's in all their stuff, is Bondsman abilities. Bondsman abilities used to be, you pick an armiger near a big boy, the armiger gets the buff, and then if you do that, the big boy also gets buff. So the big boy is better while he's leading little guys are better while they're kind of sitting with a big boy, you know? You're taking your squire to work day. It's great. It's very fluffy. I love the Bondsman mechanic. They just changed it to you buff the armiger, not the big boy. And there's a problem with the model lines of Chaos Knights in IK, where IK have a lot more big boy kits and a lot more big boy options and a lot better data sheets for big boys. And Chaos Knights have an entire second kit for armigers, and therefore they have more than twice as many armiger options as Imperial Knights. So Chaos Knights have much better armigers, Imperial Knights have much better big boys. And now you can only buff the thing that is the worst part of your faction, the armigers. And you can't buff the big guys that are the defining feature of your faction. And that is real unfortunate for Imperial Knights. They took quite a big hit. They were too good, but they were kind of like gatekeepery too good, where they didn't have too many event wins. They had a couple, but not as many as their win rate would suggest. But then they would just sit at the above the middle line and just beat people down who tried to rise up. Because there were plenty of options to just fail the Knight stat check, and that's just an unfortunate aspect. Knights needed a nerf for the health of the total meta. I get that. Towering change, I think, was a great step. I think the Bondsman ability was too far.
I frankly would have just continued increasing their points and left the Bondsman.
I would have let the Bondsman ability buff 2 armigers instead of 1 armiger, 1 big. Just cutting out half of the rule, that sucks. Because they didn't replace it with anything. Like, if you pick 2 armigers instead of an armiger and a big, that's something.
Okay, 2 armigers I'd be totally
Yeah, and then that encourages you to take more armigers. Armigers also went up in points. Like, okay, we're working with it. There's less alpha strikes. You don't get the full buffs on a big boy. Like, that's a real change to the army.
Yeah.
As it is, you're highly incentivized to run Little Knights. Little Knights went up in points and aren't very good. And
there's no brigand equivalent here.
Yeah, there's no brigand equivalent. There's no carnivore equivalent. You just have 2 knights that are mediocre at what they're trying to do. It's still not bad. Losing Overwatch on things like a Valiant, of course, is pain. Canis Rex
did go down.
went down because so few of their stratums are battle tactics. I think the only battle tactic that they have is Shoulder of the Mantle, which is a once per game stratagem that requires you to be wounded. And it becomes twice a game if you kill the enemy warlord. Then you can use it a second time. And then it's the CP reroll. So Canis Rex now has a free CP reroll every phase instead of having a free stratagem every phase, is kind of where that went. Which is still good.
Yep.
I don't mind that. But it's different. So I think Imperial Knights are worse than Chaos Knights. I don't think they're unplayable. They still hit very hard. They still hit very hard. The big Knights are still pretty good. Armigers they're not actually bad. I know I smack talk armigers a lot because I've experienced the joy of war dogs, but it doesn't actually make the armiger bad. It's just that the war dog's better. So I think Imperial Knights can sneak into the bottom of B.
It's also an army that still has very good OC and a lot of good durability compared to the game. Mm-hmm. You think putting them down here?
Yeah, I think right in that ballpark. We'll reorder a little bit, but I think that they're worse than Chaos Knights. I think that there are still options. I think Canis is still an auto-include because he's a boss and he got cheaper. I think you then take one other knight, and then you lean heavy on agents. You get 2 assassins, 2 henchmen squads, 2 big boys, fill points with armigers, and you get a lot of mission play and cheap stuff and lone ops. You're still a pretty decent army. Like, that's not a bad list. It's just, it's reduced greatly from where it was, and I think you just have to accept that.
All right, so next up is the Necrons. So this is an army that was kind of in that A tier. Towards the bottom of A, it didn't do outrageous amounts of damage, but it had a couple durable units that if you couldn't kill them, they just survived on objectives, racked up points, and denied you points. And that's what Necrons have been for this edition. It's pretty much, they are one of the ultimate board control armies, and they are fundamentally a stat check against a lot of factions, where if you couldn't deal with 10 Lich Guard with a 5 of Feel No Pain, the Lord inside for the -1 to wounds, the Reanimator helping, the Strat, if you couldn't get through that, all of a sudden they just run away on the points against you. Now there are a couple armies that could either just sit on the objectives with better OC, like Custodes, and just tank the minimal damage Necrons were doing, or there were armies that could actually potentially kill them. And if they did, it was a huge swing, because that's like a 400 plus point unit. Now the Lich Guard units went up, as well as Doomsday Arcs, which was the main offensive tool for doing damage. But Necron Warriors and some of the synergies with them went down. So Warriors went down 20 points. The Illuminator Xeris went down significantly to 185. A multiple Necron Warrior brick style is now completely viable and might in fact be stronger than the Lich Guard build, which went up quite a bit of points. So
I think it just is.
It
just is.
It is, because it absolutely dominates the mirror match. If your opponent has Lich Guard and you have the Command Barge with a Warrior unit, you might as well just shake the other guy's hand, because that's the end of that game. Over, the Warriors will just dominate the game, because neither army is going to do damage to each other. The Warriors are going to make sure the objectives are always under the that player's control.
Looking at where Necrons were to where they are, I think that Necrons are the best army from last month that didn't get a rules change. I don't know where GW drew the line. I don't know where they decided this is the armies that need a drop and these are the ones that don't. But I think that Necrons were the first army after they drew that line. Where I think they went down the line, they said, all right, Eldar needs a rules change, GSC needs a rules change, Deathwatch needs a rule change, Imperial Knights need a rules change. Okay, I think we're good. Next army on the list was Necrons. They were the best army that didn't get their mechanics messed with at all. Now the free strat thing hits everyone, and Necrons, I believe, don't have the best battle tactics.
No, they have. It's the a shooting buff, and what is the other one? I forget what the other one is, but it's not the Undying Legions.
Yeah, it's not the amazing one.
Yeah, it's the combat one. It's the combat.
Okay, totally fine. Not bad stratagems, but not I have to take multiple overlords to really get this to work anymore.
No, you're not taking any. You're taking a basic lord.
There you go. So that's cool, but I don't think that you really lost much with Necrons. Yeah, some things went up, some things went down. The fact that Crypto Thralls increased by the same amount of points as the war unit decreased is literally GW reaching and typing into the document, idiots, please take warriors now. They're literally spelling it out for you.
Please buy our warrior
kits. Please get more warriors. Go on eBay, go find, what is it? The
Indomitus box, yeah.
Yeah, go get 40 Indomitus warriors. Just do this. I think Necrons are great. Yes, they got some increases on a couple things.
Transcendent Catan went up, but only 20 points. It's 310. It's a little pricey for what you get because its damage is very minimal, but it's a good piece. It's a good piece. If you run the Command Barge, I prefer just having the enhancement on him and not running the Transcendent, but it is definitely still playable, for sure. Yeah. I don't think even Lich Guard are still playable with the increases they received, so nothing in the Necrons, in my opinion, became unplayable. Even Doomsday Arcs, I don't think you're running 3 of them. It's pretty pricey to do so, but you could. But nothing is unplayable, which is a nice place to be. I do think Necron's one problem is damage output.
Still is, yes.
If your opponent can put enough OC and durable OC on the objectives, it is very hard to get back, especially if they can kill enough of the warriors that you aren't reanimating instantly back to the middle. So in the current edition, 10th edition, you can't just, if you lose 15 bodies from your warrior unit, you can't just string all the way back to the objective, then charge on there. You used to be able to do that in 9th edition, and that's why I loved Warriors and would run them all the time. Now you have to resurrect models within range of a model that existed at the start of the phase. So if it's all the way towards your backfield where all the buffs are, then you're all the way back there. So armies that can, even if they don't kill the entire unit in one go, if they can kill it enough that it's far away from the middle objectives, that's good enough. Or if they can get onto the objectives first, move block them, and stop the OC from getting on there, those are the two ways to beat Necrons. And I think the armies that are going to be above them have those tools. I personally think they're a stat check for pretty much everything below that, where once the Warriors are on the middle objectives, that is basically it. Necrons get a max on primary, and they're going to bring enough Hexmarks and Technomancers and other stuff to score secondaries, and that's that.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
I completely agree. I think that Necrons just didn't really change in a world, like power-wise, in a world where a bunch of the other things that were top 8-ish dropped. I think Necrons are in a great spot. Like I'm very much leaning A tier. There's no way that they're in B.
I'm leaning towards there.
I think they're better than CSM.
CSM have the damage to kill them though. They might be better overall than CSM because they can beat certain armies down here harder. And the one thing that I would agree that would put them above CSM is that they have a better matchup into this army up there.
Yeah, I think CSM really are not having fun into Eldar, and I think Necrons are one of the... I actually think Necrons are going to have a positive win rate in Eldar.
I think Necrons and Grey Knights have the most consistent play to beat Eldar. Now that the Wraith Knight is dead.
Yes. The Dev Wound change is huge for Necrons, an army that had 0 mortal wound defense.
As somebody who took 30 mortal wounds from the Wraith Knight that ended up swinging the game so I couldn't win it, I love not seeing the Wraith Knight. I don't really care what else Eldar is running. Once I get the Warriors on the center of the table, if they have Night Spinners, it's annoying, but Veil of Darkness, get them all up there. Once they're on the objectives, Eldar has a lack of tool. They have to really tech hard for Necrons now.
Yeah, and I don't think Eldar are now in such a supreme position that they can afford to just pick one enemy to tech for and then ignore the rest of the field because they're just going to Eldar them anyways. Yeah. I don't think they're that S tier.
I think they can beat Necrons without having to kill the Warrior Brick. You just have to be good enough with movement tricks and pinning them away from objectives to do it. But it puts a lot of emphasis on the Eldar player to be able to do that.
Yep. Yeah, but Necrons, easily A tier, still in a really good spot. They're going to have a couple of problematic matchups. There are some people who can just kill the Warrior Brick in one activation and aren't going far out of their way to do it.
This army right here can still do it with the Acolyte Hybrid unit with the Primus.
And if anyone can just kill the Necron Warrior Brick and then kind of keep going, not like I committed my whole army onto the line to kill this one unit, but I don't have the gas for a second. Once you reach an army that can just kill a 20-man Warrior Brick every turn, there's 3
of them that we're going to get to.
Yeah, suddenly you're in trouble.
So yeah, there are going to be a couple counters, and I think towards the top, you're either going to have to accept that and just have the better matchup into the more consistent top army, which is Eldar, or you try and play a more MSU version, which is completely untested, basically. Thank you so much to the membership Vindicare. He has sniped Nicholas for a gifted sub. Thank you so much, Vindicare. We salute you.
Thank you. I love that the membership Vindicare is just sniping one membership at a time.
Well, just one at a time. That's how you do it.
One shot. That man never rolls a 1.
Critical hits, baby.
All right. A couple armies left here. Let's keep going. Orks. Orks is next. Put him in the top of S. Orks is the best.
Orks is the best.
Orks is the best.
You're crumping.
Yeah, absolutely. Jokes aside, Orks a month or 2 ago were perceived to be not very good. Then I think
I'd say 2 months ago.
2 months ago. Yeah, that's fair actually. Yep, it's August 12th. You're right. 2 months ago, Orks were perceived to not be very good.
Yeah, nobody was talking about them. Nobody was really running too many lists. The dedicated Ork players were, and they were having a pretty decent time because their win rate was always higher than you would expect.
Yeah.
People going out there, doing well, performing with them. And then once, WTC popularized seeing Ork lists doing well towards the top end of the meta. But people had been doing well with them before. Just wasn't getting noticed.
And one of the things with Orks is that they had very polarizing matchups. So they weren't really getting event wins because they just didn't play against Eldar well. Like, just old Eldar into Orks just was a problem. Just like, oh no, the Eldar went first. Oh god, I lost all 9 transports. Oh no.
Oh god.
Oh god. Yeah, just like, oops, you lost 1 on Overwatch. Oops, you lost 2 in my... It just kept happening.
Yeah.
So Orks were having certain trouble, but they were still having a relatively good time into the field. and a lot of the top stuff went down in ways that gives Orks a little more play. Orks hated towering, because I think Orks kind of got wrecked by Imperial Knights and a Wraith Knight. I think all that stuff was just like too much damage output, getting them too well.
Outrageous shooting, because the list that you were typically seeing was a bunch of trucks with units inside. You usually had a bunch of Squig Hog Riders, which are more durable for their points than they probably should be, but still not insanely durable. And then you had a couple characters that were quite durable, and MSU stuff. Yeah. And they would just jam their army into the center of the table, pop the invuln, and then you have that turn to kill them before they just overwhelm your half of the board. And from that point, they score a lot of points, and you're kind of pinned back. Yep. And that's kind of similar to how they played in 9th edition. But if you had the damage output to just say, boom, 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 you've lost too many resources, even with the invuln, they ran out of steam. Yeah.
So Orks had a very hard time into Imperial Knights, Custodes, Eldar. 2 of those armies...
And specific types of
Eldar. 2 of those 3 armies took real rough hits that directly impact their Ork matchup. Because a 5-man Custodes squad fighting first doesn't kill 2 Ork units. Kills 1. Orks go in, they lose a unit, they hit swing with the next 3 or 4. And you're no longer swinging on a 10-man Custodes guard unit, you're now hitting a smaller one. And the strat efficiency is not there, and they're not making the fight first free. Orks now feel like downright even into Custodes in what used to be their worst matchup. Orks can now get up the field into Imperial Knights, what I believe statistically was their worst matchup. I actually think Custodes was worse, but still, 2 very, very bad matchups changed drastically in ways that favor the Orks a lot. I think Orks are really up. I think Orks are A tier. I think Orks are not even bottom of A. I think they're middle of A.
Well, one of the things why they were so popular at WTC is that they could actually rush down a GSC army pretty effectively.
They were quite good into GSC.
I have not played them into Necrons
They were
in a
quite
bit.
good into Necrons.
But they have that power to be able to, I'm all over the objectives and physically blocking the space on them. What are you going to do, Necron player? Do you have the damage to kill me? Obviously, no.
Yeah, obviously not.
So you think kind of around in this area? Do they still struggle with 2-up armor contempt?
100% yes.
Okay, so then this is going to be
that's a problem. So even though I think, funny enough, I think Orks have a positive matchup and do both Necrons and GSC, I don't think that they're as high as those armies though. I would put them ahead of CSM. Is kind of like there is where I'm feeling, but again, we can reorder a little bit as we go. But I think Orks are very solidly A tier. Some of the Orks in the chat are saying their new worst matchup is Death Guard. I have no idea how that game goes, so I will choose to believe you, because I don't know.
Yeah, because -1 to hit, -1 weapon skill, that's wild.
Oh, yeah, that is actually real bad, isn't it? Oof, rough. I mean, the -1 save doesn't matter. So
that's why the meta is very interesting. Wild.
All right, off of Orks, on to the next.
Oh, the Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Mechanicus. Tell us about your girls.
All right, so, hey, you know how Necrons were the first army after the line? I think Sisters were the last army before the line. Because when you look at the bad armies, GW went in and gave several of them rules changes. I think again, they started at the bottom. They say, okay, Death Guard need a rules change, Votann need a rules change, Admech need a rules change, even if it was a small one. And I think they worked their way up, and then they stopped at a point. And I think the next army from where they stopped was Sisters. I hate to say this, I love Sisters. They're one of my favorite armies, one of my favorite model lines. I love them so much. And you've seen how I love my Sisters in battle.
You put a lot of effort into building.
Put a lot of effort into that army. Their damage output, so they got cheaper. They did not get crazy cheaper.
Yeah.
They didn't get as many points drops as Votann or Death Guard.
No.
They got comparable points drops to Admech in my mind. Yeah. Comparable. Their damage output is anemic, is the problem. Right? I unfortunately, Sisters, which used to be we're a short-ranged army, but if you step into the range, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
They now are a short-ranged army that is no longer threatening at short-ranged. They have 2 units that credibly shoot further than 18 inches. And yes, we have heavy bolters on random things. I'm not counting that. I'm talking 2 things that credibly shoot longer than 18-inch range, and that is 2 tanks. It's the Exorcist, which is a pretty decent indirect beast that's not cheap, and the Castigator. Castigator's great. Those are both good units, but now it's we're just spamming tanks. Okay, interesting. And then their melee got quartered. They lost attacks on the they lost stats on the profile. They lost the Bloody Rose access. They lost the Exploding Six's Passion access. Their datasheet rule is anemic because they put rules about being better when you get wounded on a very fragile army.
When they're wounded, they're probably dead.
Yeah, like, I mean, I very often get those buffs off of units that were near my vehicles. That's it. Like, once you, my opponent, hit a Sisters unit, I'm probably not getting the buff. And I don't think that Sisters tanks are good enough to spam it and have that be, like, the way, because other armies can spam vehicles better.
Yeah.
Because spamming vehicles for Sisters is taking, like, 6. And they're good, but they're not, like, great, and they're not good at anti-armor because they don't have high-strength weapons. Sisters' 2, like, ranged things are strength 10, AP 2, damage D6 with 0, like, ignores cover. And, of course, no access to armor contempt. So, like, to ignore armor contempt or anything like that. So you get to a point where, like, there's nothing in this army that can credibly kill a Redemptor Dreadnought. There's nothing in there that can do it. There's nothing in this army that can kill one Norn Emissary. Because it's D11. And there is one thing in this book that can wound that on 3s. And it's the Hunter-Killer Missile. And you only get one of those per tank.
One shot.
Yeah, they're one shot each. So you run into a really rough point where you don't have enough wound mods or rerolls for a mid-strength army to punch up, and it's not long range enough to do it several times. Because Retributors, an old staple, are now 18-inch range and don't have a ton of rerolls. They're ones to wound innately. Yeah. You can get them connecting late game, but they're not. You have to spend a lot of resources. You have to hold them for a while. They're not as cheap as I want. They just don't do enough. And I think Sisters have fundamental damage issues. But let's talk about the upsides here. Sisters are cheap. They have a lot of cheap units, even though, despite... Sisters had several units go up in points, by the way, which I'd like to complain about. Like, Crusaders went up in points. I don't know why.
Too cheap.
They're too cheap. Like, come on. Yeah, I think maybe there's, like, a melee weapon, like the Mace on the Nundum or Morvenval's Spear. I'd have to recheck the strength of those. I'm just talking, there's a Norn Emissary, I want to shoot it. Can I wound this on a 3? Only with a Hunter-Killer Missile, flat. Or Canis Rex. They can play the mission well because they have a bucket of cheap units to put in reserves. Cheap Seraphim to Deep Strike and Fire and Fade, do actions, whatever. Cheap units to arrive all over the place. They can throw a bucket of trash. Here's the problem. They bleed points, so the fact that they themselves can score... Sisters are good at losing a high-scoring game. And maybe there's some team value in that. I just don't think that they're good enough at it.
Because things could go wrong in that case. Yeah,
but the thing is that, like, Sisters want to take a bunch of characters. Their best stratagem is stand up a character, which makes them count twice for Assassinate now, because of the way that the secondaries are worded now.
Yep.
So if someone takes Assassinate, you're like, man, you only get your max 20 on this by getting into my lines, or by getting me to try to score primary at any point. Okay. You want to spam vehicles because it's the only efficient range output you have, and if someone sprints at you and you don't have ranged output, you're so deep in trouble because you don't have good combat. Okay, now I'm giving up Bring It Down. It's so hard to build a Sigils list that doesn't just hand out Bring It Down Assassinate, and you're not 40ing your secondaries good as secondaries. I take Tactical or, like, Cleanse Engage, and I get, like, north of a 15 on each. Like, you're good at hitting the 30s. With Sisters, you're not just like, I drop a 40 every time, and then you're not good at primary. So you can score points in a protracted game, but you can't table the opponent, and if someone just rushes you down, you're in so much trouble.
Oh, yeah.
You know where I want them. Like, you know where I'm putting them.
Are they down here or are they down here?
I'm going to go bottom of C.
I'm going to put them bottom of C.
Breaks my heart, I think they're the worst army in the game.
At least AdMech has the silver lining of they have a couple anti-vehicle units that are good. Like, they have a couple data sheets that have long-range firepower that's good. They don't have many of them, but they also have the same thing, cheap resources. Their damage is also inconsistent, but they have a couple units that are good. And that's, like, slightly more than Sisters, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, chat's telling me that Morvenval gives up 12 points on secondaries when she stands up. Come on. Why'd you gotta say that?
All right.
Yeah, they genuinely could be.
This is you basically. I don't think they're like so below AdMech or Drukhari or Blood Angels. They will keep those games close. They might not consistently win them, which is probably why they're the worst. But at the same time, you have play there because you can score a lot of points if you get better tactical draws. If you deny your opponent a couple extra turns than you didn't see.
Yeah, they do have a lot of ability to. I have a ton of cheap stuff. I move block you everywhere. I like go into corners. I score a lot of points. So if you get to the point where you can move block your opponent and outscore them, they can beat the armies that aren't good at secondaries. Yeah. Chat saying if they're the worst army in the game, they're in D. I mean, I was going to say that as the Gladius. So you just take the Gladius and you put Thundercat in it.
Yeah.
Because Thundercat are cheap. And that isn't bad. It's just so uninspiring. Like, objectively, you can say, oh, you just take a normal Gladius list and you replace whatever your melee unit was with, here, let me shove a bunch of Thundercav in instead of the Terminator Brick.
Yeah. And
you have aggressive pressure that's not as tough, but is a lot faster, doesn't hit as hard, but is pretty cheap. So you can do that instead. That's not bad. So I think that Space Wolves at their absolute potential are going to end up relatively close to Space Marines. But I just don't... I don't know.
How are you feeling? Because, like...
I think they're B tier.
Bottom of B?
Yeah, probably. I think they're better than Deathwatch. I, hate to say that out loud.
Really? Then we have to drop Deathwatch down.
Yeah.
They can't be worse than Knights.
Yeah, but all it is, again, I'm not looking at Space Wolves. I'm looking at a Gladius detachment that chose to take Thunderwolves.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I think, and that is actually a real army. I've played against it. It's not bad.
It's not bad. It does suffer against move blocking and faster armies, but at the same time, it is a lot of stuff now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But frankly, I think Space Wolves don't do enough unique stuff, so they're going for Gladius, and then there's just better factions that can be Gladius. Because you're not really relying on the unique Space Wolf stuff. And that's one of the dings against them, kind of like Blood Angels, where their unique stuff just doesn't do enough in this meta, in this 10th edition game. Yeah,
so to give a quick recap, because it looks like our stream froze and has resuscitated. We spent a CP, discarded Miracle Dice. The stream is alive now.
We discarded 6 to make sure.
Yeah, so please chat, make sure that you can hear me. Just let me know if you can hear this right now. Space Wolves, unfortunately, are just like a Gladius plus Thundercav. To close out Sisters, I don't think that they are as historically bad as other D-tier armies have been because they at least can score points. They're not... Sisters aren't good, but they have they have options to play the game, to play the mission, even if they can't play the opponent.
Yep.
That's the problem, is Sisters are an army that's not good at playing the opponent, can play the mission. They're usually not as good at it as their opponent because they're going to lose the resource war too fast to someone who's willing to be aggressive. But it's not like a Death Guard army that was like, man, we're slow, we can't score points, and I'm getting shot for all 5 turns. It's not that dire.
Yeah. It's not, this is the end of, you just struggle into everything.
Yeah, at least Sisters can try to play the game, and the player can try to impact the fate of Sisters.
Yeah, and I would totally believe you if you told me they could beat any of these armies down over here.
Yeah, that could happen.
Yeah.
I don't even know about it.
It'd be hard consistently, but they can definitely...
Could they win a game? Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So Space Wolves, we basically ranked as Gladius plus Thundercav because, unfortunately, the Born Heroes detachment, whatever, Champions of Russ, doesn't do a dang thing.
It got wrecked by Votann, old Votann.
It doesn't do a dang thing for Space Wolves. The Champions of Russ is just rough. Yeah. Space Wolves need an army to be their own army. They need a codex to be their own army. And unfortunately, until then, they are Gladius plus Thundercav. But Gladius plus Thundercav is not bad.
Yeah, and those cheap wolves that they...
Yeah, it just feels bad for Space Wolf players, feels bad for Space Marines players because it's not as good as other chapters in Gladius, but it exists, it's fine.
All right, speaking of which, Gladius Space Marines.
The Gladius.
Talked about it a lot, it's amazing.
I love the Gladius. The Gladius attachment itself is great. They lost the indirect, but a lot of the top stuff went down, and... here's what kills me, is that Guilliman got, a decent points raise. Guilliman went up, 30 points.
Yeah.
Just come on.
I didn't really see that one.
Yeah, he wasn't, a problem. He wasn't, a problem good. He was just cool good. So it's a weird thing where, I don't want to put Space Marines behind Space Wolves, because I don't want to validate Space Wolves. But also, there's no longer really anything in the Space Marine Codex that you can't improve on by just grabbing data sheets from a chapter. Yeah. None of the unique chapter data sheets in the current Space Marine Codex are exciting. None of them. The best one in my mind is genuinely Vulcan Heston, which is just okay. He just lets you reroll wounds with your Land Raider Redeemers against a second target that wasn't your oath, which is good. That's something I like to have. I think that Space Marines, they got improved. I think that they lack the good brick that Black Templars and Dark Angels do that puts them above.
Yeah.
Because Black Templars and Dark Angels have a Terminator brick beyond the normal one. That is really good. Black Templars are like, here's an Assault Terminator brick. I gave it a 5-up, feel no pain. Dark Angels are like, here's a Terminator brick. It is a different, slightly better weapon and -1 damage. You've got a couple cool Space Marine characters like Shrike, Vulcan, Calgar, who say, hey, I'm going to make my unit pretty dang cool. Or I'm going to make the dudes within 6 inches of me pretty dang cool. They don't change the army.
Yep.
Shrike is dope. He doesn't change the army. Vulcan makes he stands next to Redeemer, makes it better. All right, that's nice. Calgar makes his unit a bit better, hit a little harder. Sweet, awesome. Guilliman's a little expensive. Luckily, Marines do have good battle tactics because they have 3. I think the +1 wound on the charge is a battle tactic. I know that Armor of Contempt is a good one, and I know that I think Storm of Fire, the ignore cover dev doctrine. So at least 2 stratagems, one you want in your opponent's turn, one you want in yours. 2 of them are good. With that said, I think that genuinely the named characters that you can get access to in Space Marines are better than Thundercav. I think Space Marines are going to be they're going to be like middle B tier to me. Like they were low, but I think that they just don't build a brick that hits the critical mass of the Dark Angel Black Templar bricks. And I think that is a problem.
Are they here?
I think they're like there, like right below Chaos Knights. They're still like midish B. But like I would rather have access to Vulcan than access to Thundercav. I'd rather have access to Ventress and Tigurius and Calgar and Guilliman than access to Thundercav. So I think ahead of IK, maybe behind guard, I think right there is fine. I think they're good right there. All right, 5 armies to go.
All right, next up, Tau Empire, an army that was languishing towards the bottom, but had a particularly strong build that could do a lot of damage and was very annoying to deal with. And that was a bunch of Ghost Keels, a bunch of Crisis Suits with commanders, and then supporting Observer units. And that list went down a lot of points, like a good amount of points. So you got, in most Tau lists, you got like 150 to 200 something points back on your Tau list, and a lot of their competitors went down. A lot of those top armies and armies that were above them went down significantly. And that's a huge deal for Tau. So I think they are massively improved. I believe that that same type of archetype is still the best way to play them. You just get more stuff playing it. There is a mechanized version with Breachers and Devilfish and all that stuff that is probably pretty solid, and you can play that at tournaments and do well with it. But I think if you want to play and punch up into the better armies, you probably need to start running multiple Crisis bricks and bring the damage, bring the speed, bring the damage. And I think Tau absolutely do that. So if we're looking up here at what they can play against, they have pretty good matchup into Grey Knights because if you teleport away from the objectives, awesome. Otherwise, you take an insane amount of damage.
Also,
Cyclic Ion.
You don't have to get within 9, right?
Don't
just
have to.
10 inches away.
Exactly.
And
Just shoot 'em.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about the Cyclic Ion Blaster. It's 3 shots on this gun. When it's overcharged to Strength 8, AP 2, easy access to ignore cover, and 2 damage. And yes, you take a bunch of hazardous tests, but on average, when you do the whole thing, you'll lose about 2 models. You could spend a reroll to make sure you maybe lose 1. And that is an absurd amount of damage when you're in Kalyan and you get sustained hits or sustained hits 2 if you're being guided. Easy access to ignores cover, which is a fantastic rule in this edition. This army hits a lot. Full rerolls access from Tetras or reroll 1s from stealth suits. The Crisis unit itself does insane amounts of damage. And there's very few armies that can just stand there and take that, especially because you can move it 18 inches and strike and fade back 12 behind a ruin.
Yep, it's pretty good.
There's not too many armies in the game that can efficiently try and move block this.
A lot of the indirect pieces got worse.
Huge buff
in the
to
points,
Tau.
which is a massive for Tau. Because I think Tau, I don't know where we're going to put Tau. I think they're going to be above guard. I think that guard would just ragdoll Tau. But that's not how we rank things.
Yep,
but strength 10 AP 2 flat 3 indirect is like the best possible thing you can have in Tau.
It definitely is. It forces them to not have those great staging points.
Yep.
Or they just try and threat overload you turn 1. But the indirect was a problem. Night Spinners are still going to be a problem for Tau because it prevents you from advancing. So you lose a lot of the speed that you would have with the unit. So Eldar is still going to be a problem for Tau. They don't just insta-kill some of the most durable units in the game, but they can put a lot of damage on them.
Yeah.
And things like Necron Warriors Tau are one of the few armies that can actually just point all the guns at them and just delete the unit.
Yep, they really are. The Tau shooting phase is terrifying. This is an army where I think it's important to clarify that we are not ranking the army. We are ranking the best build at its peak. Yep. Because I think Tau are crazy good. I think the best Tau build is very mono build. I don't think the second best Tau build is very good. But I think the best Tau build is pretty dang good.
The build that I've been running is multiple Ghost Keels for my board control. At least 2 Bricks of Crisis. You could even go to a third one if you really wanted to. Mm-hmm. And then a bunch of supporting pieces, just playing the mission, screening, doing all that. And this archetype is quite strong. We just played it against John's Tyranids in the War Room. If you want to check that game out, it was a barn burner and showed the strength of both armies. So I think Tau is an A-tier army, personally, when you play this list.
Yep.
I think it has the tools to cause people all sorts of problems. It's not necessarily... It does have weaknesses, but it is something that you can play into pretty much anything and you cause problems, and that's what I like.
I agree. Tau are straight to A. They're not a candidate for S. They are not remotely in B tier. Now, A, we can sort it in the middle. We can toss it in the middle for now, but we can sort it in a minute. But yeah, I think Tau are best case Tau is great.
It's quite strong.
Yeah.
It is quite strong.
It's quite good.
It does require quite a bit of skill to do efficiently. You can't just jam 18 Crisis Suits in the middle of the table and expect not to take too much damage in return, like in 9th edition. But if you play it properly, your opponent is going to have headaches trying to deal with it.
Yeah.
Thousand Suns.
This is a tough one. Thousand Suns were, in my mind, a very good upper A-tier army.
Yep.
They got no rules changes themselves, but I believe that most of their stratagems aren't battle tactics.
They have maybe a couple of them.
I think they've got a couple, but it's no longer just the, everything's a battle tactic.
They actually have several of them.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm going to look it up.
Check that for me. They got a lot of point hikes. The optimal, or what's considered the optimal T-Suns list, did go up a decent amount. If you look at Vic's list from WTC, Vic had a very successful WTC run. He did great work with his T-Suns. Super good list. Arn from Team Germany as well. Great results from T-Suns. The army was awesome. They were stacked. However, that list went up well north of 200 points. I think it was verging on 300 points.
I was totally wrong. They have 1.
All right. Is it the reroll hits and wounds?
It is reroll hits and wounds for psychic attacks.
That is a great stratagem, but it's only 1.
Yeah,
which means it's not something you do in your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
They're no longer blanking multiple saves.
They're
no longer indirect 2 CP. Yeah, so full rerolls is the only battle tactic now. Okay, yeah, that's about what I thought. That's a great, discard Cabal points, reroll hits and wounds. 100% you would just take that as a Cabal, Kabbalistic ritual. So I think T-Suns are still pretty good. They're no longer terrorizing people. I could see them top of B. I'm not accepting them lower than B. The army did take some points hits, but that army was really good.
It has an insane damage potential, and there aren't too many armies that can deal with Magnus quick enough before you just take all the damage in the world.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. I think top of B is totally reasonable for them.
Yeah.
I think you can still get 23 Cabal points in a list and still have all the resources that you want. Mm-hmm. You're just kind of skimming off all the cheap stuff that you used to be able to take from Demon Allies and such.
I could even see T-Suns in A tier.
Yeah, I could definitely.
I could see them bottom of A. They're not getting higher than bottom of A to me, but I could put them bottom of A and not really feel bad about it. All right, 3 left.
Yep.
Ooh.
The Tyranids.
All right.
New Codex Tyranids, the only army with a Codex.
Yeah, so we just kind of have to throw out the index and forget about it. Yes, you can still take that attachment. Yeah, that attachment is really good. Tyranids went up in points an inexplicable amount. But they also got some good rules in the Codex. The index attachment is great. They got at least 2 more attachments that I think are quite viable. So even though they went up in points, I think Tyranids are still pretty dang good. They still score points relatively well. They can put concentrated damage in certain spots. They're not a high damage army, but they're not anemic either. They're a mid damage army that scores really well and has a lot of board control. I'm quite high on Tyranids. You're catching a little bit of Tyranid bias here. I love Tyranids. They're my first army. They're my favorite army. And you know what? I painted the Death Leaper in that picture, and therefore we're not putting them too low. I genuinely think that Tyranids are quite good, though. I think that they're going to struggle into a certain couple of matchups. I think there is a stat check they can fail. There is certain things, like I think Tyranids hate indirect. Because if you turn 1, your double Knight Spinner list kills the Biovore, I'm just like, oh god. And then the Incarn's my backlines, and I'm like, oh no.
Because now you don't have the redundancy. You have
I don't. I have 1, because I can only fire 1 at a time. So
Yeah.
I'm like, am I going to pay 75 points for a backup into just the Eldar matchup? Unlikely. Unlikely. But I think Tyranids are genuinely good because they score well, and they control the board very well.
They just have a lot of stuff.
And also, they have a lot of options. Because frankly, as the meta adapts, I think that Tyranids can look at, oh, maybe I do go back to the Invasion Fleet Detachment from the Index. Maybe we're now at the point where I take the Vanguard instead of the Nexus. So, I'm thinking Tyranids are A tier. I don't know where, like, we don't really have numbers on the Tyranid Codex yet, but I think they're pretty dang good.
Just put them in the middle somewhere?
Yeah, put them in the middle somewhere. I think we can kind of sort. We're going to have to sort the order, because
That's
A tier is
surprising.
actually getting crowded.
Because when the Tyranid players saw the points, and even when you saw the points...
I was
increases,
unhappy, yeah.
It's like, oh my god. But in practice, still playing it, they are a strong army.
I played a couple games with the points printed in the book before we got the balanced data slate. And I'll be honest, if Tyranids were playing with the Codex points, I think they would be ahead of Dark Angels. I think they would be like the literal top of A tier if they hadn't gotten the points changes. Maybe even bottom of S. Like, I think if Tyranids hadn't gotten any points changes... Now, some of the points changes made no damn sense, to be clear. Tyrannifex up 55 points after getting nerfed was a war crime. But Tyranids are still pretty good. Mm-hmm. I'm happy about them in general. You just have some of the things you took before just got removed. Like the Tyrannifex is just no longer a takeable unit, which is insane. But in general, I'm still quite confident that Tyranids are a good, well above average army. They're gonna have some problems. Every army in A tier has at least 1 or 2 problems.
All right. Leagues of Votann.
All right.
So one of the other armies that was standing down that D tier with Death Guard, they are also no longer in D tier. They received several buffs. First, their army rule, which used to be before the game, you pick 1 enemy unit and it starts with 2 judgment tokens, which is +1 to hit, +1 to wounds. Now you pick 4 in a 2,000 point game, which is massive. It means usually most armies don't have more than 3 like critical units, so you can pick their like infiltrating unit or whatever they're going to try and sacrifice in the early game for points, and either they don't do that, which means they lose out on points, or they do it and then you get a bunch of CP on that one instance, which is quite valuable. Since Votann actually have a very solid suite of stratagems. They have very good flex stratagems. Now, they got points decreases all over the board. My list gained like 300 points, and even their best unit, which was Hearthguard, went down. So you can fit an insane amount of stuff in a Votann list now. They can play a very durable style where you run Land Forts and Hearthguard and just have a bunch of 2-up save stuff that can Void Armor for -1 AP and sit and cover and be a bear for a lot of armies to deal with.
Absolutely.
Kind of like what the Black Templars are doing. Or you could have just a ton of stuff all over the board. Multiple troops or cheap characters inside Sagittars. Spread the board, 3 Pioneer units, and then like a couple bricks of Hearthguard holding down the middle of the table, and play a more go-wide version of Votann. But I think they have a lot of options now. Some of the data sheets aren't particularly good, like Berserks. And lack of rerolls means that sometimes you can do less than you should, especially if the unit doesn't have judgment tokens on it. Which means I prefer, I think, running a couple bricks and then a lot of MSU stuff, because losing Votann units is the best way to get your opponent to generate judgment tokens on themselves. Yeah. So I'd like to have a lot of stuff that plays the mission, dies, makes it so my late game units just dominate because they're always +1 to hit, +1 to wound. I think Votann are dramatically improved. I personally think that they are better than all the armies here and are somewhere in this B tier. I think that their lack of speed is the one thing against them on their like shooting units. Yeah. Besides the Sagittar. The Sagittar is fast enough and can get angles and is great, but it hits on 3s with +1 to hit and +1 to wound is nice, but it doesn't have insane volume of fire.
My one game into Votann post-Dataslate, Votann felt really good, but very pre-measurable. Very, like, if I have a mobile army and I know what I'm doing and I ask questions of my opponent, I can avoid a lot of the problems with Votann. And Votann are relatively durable. They're not deploy on the line and sprint at you durable into most things.
Yeah.
And so, I agree. I think Votann solidly middle of the pack. A great increase for an army that, again, was languishing in Death Guard tier.
Yeah.
Points changes were awesome for them. I can very easily see them up to lower B tier.
Yeah,
That's where I'm feeling.
I think they're around here.
Yeah, lower end of B tier.
Because
if you want to,
if you want to contest the middle of the table against them, it's actually pretty darn annoying. Because that's exactly where they want you to be. As soon as you're an army that wants to just jam yourself onto the center, they're like, all right, you're on +1 to +1 wound. Here's a boatload of shots.
Yeah.
So I'd put them roughly in this area.
Sure. Yeah, anywhere.
I think they play the mission better than Guard, frankly.
Okay.
And they don't really care about indirect fire.
Anywhere in that ballpark, I'm kind of okay with.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think they're comparable to like Marines now, which is something you would never have said.
Indeed. We've got one more army to talk about, and then we will be answering all those super chats. Pinky promise. We love and appreciate the support. We are going to hit every super chat, so we have not forgotten you. But one army left, and this is World Eaters.
So World Eaters are an army that has... It's one of the armies that has a dramatic difference between whether it goes first or goes second. I believe Goonhammer has the stats on this, but they have a huge advantage if they go, in terms of their win rate, a huge advantage if they go first, and much less so if they go second.
Yeah.
Now, some of their key stuff didn't go up, like Angron, but he didn't didn't go down, but also didn't go up at the same time.
Angron's actually pretty good.
He's pretty solid. Their army rule is quite solid as well. They actually have a rule that makes sense and actually buffs their army. They got a lot of other stuff cheaper, so things like their Exalted and their 8 bounds, they're quite a bit cheaper. They were dramatically overcosted, and now Jack is of the opinion that they're like a little bit overcosted still for what they bring, because it's...
I tend to agree.
It's a hard-hitting melee unit, but it's still relatively slow, and it's not that durable.
Yeah. So World Eaters are relatively fast melee army that does not even pretend to shoot. You have to take the non-thematic choices, like
Lord of Skulls.
Yeah, like a Lord. I mean, a Lord of Skulls is thematic.
Yeah.
But like you have to take like a World Eaters, like I don't know, Predators, Forge Fiends, units that don't do a dang thing in World Eaters other than just be a stat line. You have to take that to really do anything at range, and it's not nearly the same as the CSM version. Like a CSM and a World Eater Forge Fiend are different units. Like, let's not just say, oh yeah, we snuck in a Forge Fiend. It's like it's not. It's just different. You just don't reroll hits or explode or lethal or dev wounds. None of that. Or pact. Nothing. So I think World Eaters struggle because I think they just didn't get quite cheap enough, because the problem is that the way World Eaters are designed, they're so binary. Mm-hmm. They either go first and swamp you or they don't. They either have a critical mass of like bodies to throw at you and just drown the objectives in blood, or they don't. And I think that World Eaters went from not even close to just below the line. Like, there's a line, there's a critical mass, it's the Orc World Eater diagonal. Yeah. And you're either on the can swamp or cannot swamp side of the diagonal. And I think Orcs are just above it, and World Eaters are just below it. Where I think World Eaters they're like 5 points a model away on all of the 8-bound models from being able to actually get there. But they're not quite there. Yeah. They're improved. I think that they're relatively high up in C tier. They have some matchups that they can just dramatically bully. Yeah. And then they just have some matchups where it's like, yeah, we're not actually like really, like I went second against the wrong army. Yeah, all right. You want lunch? You want a drink? I think that they just have too many problems to really make B tier for me.
Yeah. One of the things about World Eaters is that they are a melee swamp you army, in an addition that is bringing a lot of guns generally. Yeah. And a lot of guns is what they hate.
Yeah, they do hate that.
A lot of guns from a lot of different angles is not what they want. Orcs at least bring a extra layer of durability to the table that they could potentially survive.
And a quantity.
So maybe World Eater, like Khorne Berserkers and Rhinos, the Jackals, like just try and get them up the table and have a lot of redundancy, kind of like a Sisters, but actually hit hard in combat. Sorry, John. That's probably where they're at. I tend to rate them relatively low here.
You mean, in C tier for sure.
Down here.
I'm thinking the upper end of C tier, but... I'm
thinking in this area.
Yeah, I think they're better. I don't think they're better than Blood Angels. I actually think Blood Angels are a little bit low at the moment.
Okay, we'll adjust in a second.
Yeah.
But Blood for the Blood God, John McCardell! I had to do it.
Of course. John McCardell, thank you so much for your support. You're a hero. World Eaters are moving up in the world, but they're not moving up a ton.
Yeah, I think they are towards the bottom half. Frankly, their go first win rate will put them higher.
Yep.
But I think they're going
That's out of your control.
Yeah, I think armies like Votann and Tau and others getting stronger, at least shooting armies, is also hurts them.
Oh god, I cannot imagine a World Leader versus Tau game. That sounds horrendous. That sounds sounds unconscionable.
How many models can I kill in a turn?
Corn is
Probably
not
all.
pleased.
Okay, so let's go ahead and readjust this, and then we will kind of give our overall synopsis, and then we'll do all the super chats.
All right, so let's rank S tier first.
Yep.
I'm happy where it's at.
I'm happy where it's at.
No
There's just an army that is going to be well above 55% win rate.
Yeah, there's one army that did not feel like it got hit enough. I'm actually very happy looking at how many armies we are considering for A tier here.
Yeah.
I think GW really fixed the middle of the game.
They helped compress it.
I think they compressed it really well. And Eldar is no longer as far above the A tier armies as they were. It's just that they are still above them.
They just have the best data sheets. They have the best rules for their detachment and their stratagems. They just have the best of everything, unfortunately.
Yeah. A tier is where this is going to get real interesting. So this is not yet in what I consider the correct order. So hold the screenshots. We're almost there. We have what? Is that 10, 11 armies in?
10.
2, 4, 5. Yeah, 10. Okay. Who do we think is the best army in A tier? Because like Dark Angels, I think was the best when we put them there. When there was like 2 or 3 armies.
It really depends on what we want to prioritize.
Yeah, this is hard.
There's a couple armies in there here that have much better matchups into Eldar than others.
Yep.
And then there's several of them that beat the other ones more consistently.
That's the thing. It's like I think Necrons are much better into Eldar than Dark Angels.
But we'll lose more often than not to like half of these armies.
Yeah, but I think Dark Angels can beat up Necrons.
Yeah.
Like I think they can do that pretty good. I would bet on myself. I'm playing Dark Angels into Necrons. I would bet on Dark Angels. But into Eldar. Yeah, it's a whole different...
I would rather just have 20 warriors.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just not, it's not the same. So this is tough. I'm unsure what to do here.
I think so. I would personally rate the armies that can control the board and bring enough damage output to kill the other durable units.
That's the thing. Is Dark Angels are better than most of the A tier for board control. Not all of them, and they do bring damage. You've got good melee, you've got good shooting. You don't have a ton of long range shooting, but like Space Marines can still string it together. Who's on top?
Between Dark Angels and Black I think it's one of those.
Just in general.
I think it's one of those.
I think Dark Angels are better than Black Templars. I'm quite confident in.
Okay, I think they deserve to be up there because they are going to create fundamental problems. If you don't have the tools to deal with either of these, it's going to be because the thing is, Eldar used to spam the anti-tank platforms. They're going to do more infantry-heavy builds now, and so they don't auto just delete any elite infantry and vehicle.
Yeah,
which opens up space to run that.
I'm looking at the list here. Dark Angels top of A tier. I'm with it. I'll put a pin on that one. There's always going to be some comments. I don't even know what Dark Angels win rate is. I don't actually care what the Dark Angel win rate is. Like, I'm not going to look because I genuinely believe that the Deathwing Knight unit elevates the Gladius detachment so hard. Just gives it something it just didn't have and said, congratulations, you have it. You get the good Terminator brick. You get to keep all of the goodness that is the Gladius detachment. So I'm definitely in favor of the Deathwing Knight over the Black Templar. I think that's just Dark Angels are better. I'll keep Dark Angels on top. I actually think some people should be between Dark Angels and Black Templars, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, what do you think?
The
only one I would put over there is GSC.
I actually would put Necrons ahead of Black Templars. I'm not talking the head-to-head. Maybe, I don't know how Black Templars versus Necrons goes.
But let's look at it. So, these two armies are good into Necrons. This one is good into Necrons. This one is good into Necrons. This one...
I have no idea.
I have no idea. This one is probably pretty decent into them.
Okay, so maybe
this one's decent.
Necrons.
This one's decent as well. Like, Necrons don't just eat... They have a better matchup into Eldar.
Yeah.
If that is the only criteria, then I would put them up. But I think they don't have consistent win matchups into these because they don't do enough damage.
Yeah.
And against the better players, there are ways to tie up warriors to prevent them from controlling all the objectives. That's what makes me nervous about them. But I do think they have the best matchup into Eldar probably of anybody. So...
Okay.
What do you want to prioritize?
Yeah, the other thing is like punching down as well, because I feel like the Necrons don't do as well into the rest of the A tier, but they do better into the S tier, and they just like wreck the B tier.
But that's why I think they can be down here. They're still above all those.
Okay, yeah, they're still above. All right.
So I'll just leave them here for now.
All right, we'll leave them there for now.
What else?
I could put GSC over Black Templars. Yeah. I could do that.
The mobility of GSC is still very tricky.
Yeah.
And if they do crippling damage, which they totally can, AP4 up to AP4 ignores cover on their blasting charges. You can just delete almost anything.
I mean, I have a theory.
A lot of people are down on GSC. This army is very
really
strong,
good.
And causes nightmares.
Okay, so I know I actually think Tau and Tyranids I would put over Black Templars.
Yeah, is that? I feel like Black Templars are better than into Eldar, but Tau could actually go head to head with this. I think they'll struggle against GSC or annoying.
Yeah, GSC are probably going to be tough.
You want to put Tyranids above? I'm okay putting Tyranids above.
Yeah, I think they're just they're either just above or just. I think they're very similar in tier to Black Templars. Truthfully, I don't know how the head-to-head matchup goes. I've got no knowledge on that. But just on the into the field, I think that they're comparable.
Both of these have a tricky matchup into Eldar for sure.
Yeah, no one loves that matchup. That's probably. I mean, yeah, I think that all three of those armies are decidedly the Templar Tyranid Tau combo, the triple Ts. I think I'm very okay putting all of those above Necrons and Orks. I think those three are the next three. Just the order, you could go anywhere on that.
Okay.
We can leave it where it's at if you want. I know you like leaving your Tau low, so that when you beat my Tyranids, you can be like, "Aha, you fool!"
I'm played up. I'm
playing up. Yeah, see, honestly, all three of those armies feel very comparable in power level to me. I think that's just we need more information.
Yep.
All of them above Necrons, I'm okay with. I think Tyranids are better than Necrons. I could see Templars and Tau ahead of them as well, because I think they're all about even there.
And then Orks, Chaos Space Marines, Grey Knights, Thousand Suns.
I think T-Suns are about to slide down a letter. Yeah, I think they're going down a little bit, honestly, yeah. That looks about right.
Yeah.
That looks about right. That's a populated A tier.
Yeah, that's going to be 9 factions in A tier.
So you okay with that? Those 9 for A tier?
I'm good with
that. I think that and I think that order is good enough.
Yeah.
Again,
it's close.
Templar
everybody in here
Tau is so interchangeable. For me, we just need to see more.
Some of them are better into this field up here. Some of them are way better into this, and some have a better Eldar matchup versus others. So depending on which one you think is more important, they'll swap.
I also think win rate wise, I think Necrons are actually going to overperform where we put them.
They definitely will.
I think Necrons, I just don't like.
They require you have to have know-how of how to deal with warriors, because if you just let them swamp the middle objectives, you've probably just given up the game if you can't kill them.
Yeah, just so that we don't run on forever, I say we keep A tier where it's at, but I'm just going to lodge an asterisk, log a complaint. I think Necrons are better than where we have them right now, but I don't know where to put them.
Yeah, because they will struggle into this.
Yeah, we need to see how Necrons do because I haven't seen Necrons much post-late. I haven't seen them post-late. I know they're still good. I haven't seen how they interact with everyone that changed. Mm-hmm. I know what Necrons do. I don't know what the armies around them do to Necrons yet. So we can leave them there, but I would not be surprised if Necrons end up a little better than where we have them right now. We'll just have to wait and see.
I honestly think they will have a better win rate than these.
Yeah.
Because the army is just a bit easier to play than getting the high value out of this or the Tyranids, etc. All right, Thousand Suns, they still can do insane amount of damage. It's not as consistent. They have less cheap stuff, so they really do have to kind of kill you.
I think they're straight on the top of E tier.
But they can do crippling damage.
I actually think Custodes need to get kicked down a little bit. I love them. I think they're worse than Chaos Knights.
What about Gladius Marines?
I think they're worse than Gladius Marines. I think they're right there. I think they just went solid middle of B. I think Gladius moved past them. Yeah.
All right.
I'm okay with Custodes, Votann, Guard all being in that same ballpark. That to me sounds like a good trio. I actually think we've got the order pretty decently set on B tier. Custodes
are better at primary. Votann are better at secondaries, and then the Guard have a tool that is good that can punch up.
Yeah, Guard are just weird. They can punch up, they can punch down. They're so weird. Okay, I'm good with that right there.
Imperial Knights, Space Wolves, and Deathwatch.
I hate to say that Space Wolves are better than Deathwatch, but I think they are. Yep. Rough. Yeah, I think I'm good with B tier right there.
Okay. So that'll be 9 factions in B tier.
Okay.
Same as A. And then C tier. We got Death Guard, Chaos Demons, Blood Angels, World Eaters, Drukhari, Admech, and Sisters. Death Guard. Still probably requires more testing. I still think the lack of speed is going to hurt them overall, but their army rule is very good.
I think they're better than all the armies below them.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Is I think they are better than all the armies.
How about these armies here?
I don't.
I'm skeptical of that.
You think the Knights are too high?
No, I'm skeptical of them being able to consistently beat Knights.
I don't think. Yeah, they probably still don't.
Yeah, I don't think they beat the armies up here.
No,
I think
they could. They could be better than Deathwatch. I don't want to do it. It hurts so bad.
Should we bring Deathwatch down or just keep them there?
I think I hate to say it. I think they could slide down. I think they could. Oh God.
And then that means they're probably sliding below Death Guard.
Yeah, that's pain. That's a pain I didn't want to experience.
You don't want to see yourself below Death Guard.
I really don't, but I think I think we can do it. Yeah. Oh God, that hurts.
All right, Chaos Demons. They still have a solid army role, and their data sheets aren't out.
Yeah.
Like they still have very good cheap resources. They have stuff like pink horrors that could come into the meta, and you can still run a bunch of monsters.
Yeah.
They definitely struggle into 2-up Armor of Contempt, so they're not going anywhere high.
Yeah.
But are we too harsh on the demons here?
I don't think so. I think demons are exactly there. I think Blood Angels we're being too harsh on.
Where do you think Blood Angels?
So the problem is, again, are we ranking the Blood Angels Blood Spirit attachment or whatever it's called?
I think so.
Or are we... But if we're doing that, then Dark Angels are also too high. Because Dark Angels, I'm not ranking the Unforgiven Task Force top of it.
I think it's better to... If they're in Gladius, they're at least here.
That's the thing, is like a Blood... If you just take a Gladius and put
I think we're
Death Company, then I think that we're putting Blood Angels too low.
Okay, I think we're basing them off of their unique detachment, because if you just take Gladius with their unique stuff, it's at least here. It's around there.
But then we're doing Dark Angels differently.
Why is that?
Because that's not where the Unforgiven Task Force is. Like, we're not doing the unique... that's a Dark Angel.
All right, let's highest potential of them, because that's what
Then I think that they're up there with Space Wolves.
Okay.
Then I think they're like there. You can put them ahead or below. I actually think that the Blood Angel units are slightly better than Thundercalf. Because
probably Death Company alone. Or
Death Company are pretty dang good. Jump Pack or Foot. I'm okay with Blood Angels being up there. Yeah. Blood Angels and Space Wolves both feel bad because it feels like a not optimal way to play the Gladius. But they do have the Gladius. And the Gladius, it's very hard to take the Gladius below B tier.
So then the question is Death Guard better than the two of those?
That is a good question.
Because I could see them here. I don't think they're going to go above Knights.
No, I think... Yeah, honestly, yeah. Death Guard, lower end of B.
Their rule is very good.
Their rules are good.
Okay, so then Deathwatch, Chaos Demons. Then we got World Eaters above Drukhari.
Yep.
Then we have Admech and Sisters.
And I think I am content with that.
I'm pretty content with that. Spoiler alert, we're going to play Admech into Drukhari and find out about this one. Maybe I can dominate the Drukhari and do some good stuff for Admech. Yeah. But I don't think anybody is so below that they don't have, like, Sisters, Admech, Drukhari. They have play into everything.
None of that feels D tier.
And they could punch up into this stuff.
Yep. Fully agreed. I don't think that, even though Sisters, I do think that they're the bottom of C tier. I don't think that they are by such a margin that they deserve to be an entire different letter from Admech.
Yeah.
So
I was trying to
see if we could get a little better. So I think this is the final. I think we take our screenshots here, right?
Yep.
If you're gonna be sharing that, that's the one that I'll sign off on. Screenshot it, share it. Tell your friends that I hate Sisters. Well, I don't know. I don't. I love them.
So big picture here. The game is much more compressed than it was. And Aeldari, even though they're the best army with the best rules, they're still not... I don't think they're going to be towering. They're not going to be at 70% win rate. No. God help us if they are.
Yeah, I think they're going to be close to 60. They could be 58. They'll be 61 on certain weekends.
But they are the army to beat. They are the one that's going to have the easiest time to win tournaments because they just have consistently the best rules, the best data sheets. Yep. And it's easier to play Aeldari than pretty much any other faction that is good.
Yeah, that's true.
If you make mistakes, Eldar have multiple fallbacks and safety nets.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see like how a lot of these armies pivot with the new directions because we did just get the balanced data slate. We have not played 100 games with it.
Yeah.
I think I've only played 3 games since Thursday.
Played like 6, 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I just,
I've watched a bunch of extra.
Yeah, that's true.
too,
I've watched a couple as well, but maybe I've gotten 4.
So
No, I think I've gotten 4 now that I
less
say
than
that.
20. I've seen less than 20 games on the balance patch.
Absolutely.
So it's obviously impressionistic. There's no tons of data. There's a little bit of RTT data from the weekend, but that anything can happen in RTTs.
Yeah.
I've won like 8 RTTs with Town R.
Yeah, like anything
you can run
happen.
anything if you're good and win. So
I think that GW genuinely brought us a lot closer. I think they took a good shot at it.
Yep.
The place that they missed is embarrassing because it's the most obvious thing to hit, which is like, everyone and their mother knew that Eldar was the thing that required the biggest change.
Big changes.
And so it's awkward because I can look at it and say, wow, how is that the thing you missed? Eldar, the thing that everyone was talking about on Reddit every day.
Like I said, I think they just put in their brains too much emphasis on Dev Wound's change is going to stop Eldar and the Wraith Knight going away is going to just stop Eldar. And then they're 350 points increase on like the top list is a lot, but at the same time their rules are just so good. It is just that good. Their data sheet, you look at them, wow, it has an amazing data sheet rule, and then I look at one of the other random units from a different codex, and like, this unit does nothing, it's just stats.
Yeah.
Eldar don't really have that. They have awesome synergy with their stuff.
Yeah, so I think this Balanced Dataslate has done a ton to help the middle of the pack and the middle of tournaments. I think mid-tables of tournaments are going to be a lot less toxic than they used to be. Yep. I think they're much improved there. I think that the overall tournament, experience for a lot of people is going to be so much better than what it was. And that is really nice to see. That is genuinely, I'm so happy to see that. But it's not perfect. It was never going to be perfect.
No, we didn't expect perfection. But we needed this. We needed a significant enough change to help make 40. Let us play 10th edition, not Eldar Hammer.
It does feel like they've exceeded the bar, because like the floor was like fix where we're at right now. They've done that. I wish they'd gone a little harder on Eldar. I genuinely believe they've gotten every army out of D tier. I really would love to be playing a game where there isn't an S tier. Yep. I would love that, because unfortunately it does feel like it's like, all right, what am I going to take this tournament? Am I going to take Eldar or an A-tier army? Like, that's my consideration. It's like Eldar or anything else. And Eldar is unfortunately just looming there. And I don't really want to play Eldar. I'm not an Eldar player. Power to those who are. Power to those who were before June, specifically. But, yeah, still a small miss on Eldar. A miss on Eldar. And everything else, though, I'm pretty happy with the direction they've done. Yeah. And and we're in the Codex time now, right? So the meta is going to start changing. It's not going to be changing again in 3 months. It's going to change as soon as the Space Marine Codex comes out, which is probably before the next balance patch.
Yep, and the roadmap has Necrons, Admech
probably by the end of the year.
It says winter.
Yeah,
and then
winter,
we should get a balance patch in January. So like a lot of changes are going to come, but this meta is going to change rapidly. People are going to come up with new list ideas. We're going to find out what the top armies are. Then all of a sudden the counters are going to come out and the weird janky armies.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm going to lose like a game with Tyranids to Space Wolves at some point at a tournament, and they're going to be like, "What about that tier list, John?" I'm like, yeah, okay, you got me. There's always there's one ranking on here that's wildly wrong. I have no doubt. We'll find out later. But yeah, first impressions post Balanced Dataslate.
The game is in such a better state. It's insane.
It's much better.
And frankly, if we want to, I went ahead and saved the the picture from the last one.
Yeah, let's take a look.
If we go back and look at that one real quick, you can see that this is the previous tier list from before the balance patch. Bunch of armies in D tier.
4 armies in D.
A lot of armies in C. Good amount of B. But this S tier and A tier is just full of armies that were pretty much well above whatever was below them, frankly.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the gap between letters was bigger before.
Yep.
Not only were there different armies in different places, I think the gap between armies was quite significant.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. If you like this type of content, please leave a comment below letting us know what you thought about our tier list. Where would you put the factions? What do you think we did well with? What do you think, what things would you do differently? Subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends about us. All that massively helps. And if you want some of the new Balance Update content, we're releasing State of the Factions on every single army, talking about their new place in the meta, the new lists we're working on, what their significant changes are. That's coming over the next 2 weeks. And then on top of that, we are releasing tons of games with the new balance patch. We have Grey Knights versus Necrons already. We have Tyranids versus Death Guard. We've got Tau versus Tyranids. And we got Chaos Space Marines versus Black Templars coming up later this week as well. So click the description below, thewarroom.vhx.tv. There's a 3-day free trial. Sign up, check out the games, check out all the content, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. You can also get access to our awesome community. And thank you everybody who super chatted and left us.
Did we go through all the super chats?
We're going to.
Oh,
we're
okay,
going
perfect.
to.
I was about to say.
Anybody who's checking out now, we're going to go through all of the super chats and answer all the questions that you have. If you want to answer a question, feel free to leave a super chat and we will get to them. But I just want to thank everybody right now after we did the summary.
All right. Sweet.
All right, starting off with the cyborg John Lennon from 2051. His hand is a spatula. I feel like you should read this one.
I do suspect. So Kyle asks, how many points would you be comfortable having left over in a list? Also, John, avoid the manimal. His name is Death. Thank you, Cyborg John Lennon, for giving me the warning of who will claim my hand and make me replace it with a spatula. Very convenient for making eggs, though. So, as far as replacements go, that could be worse.
You become the breakfast man.
Absolutely, I'm the breakfast man. How many points would you be comfortable having left over in a list? So if I have 10 points left over, I twitch, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to find something to do here. If I have 10, though, I'm willing to accept it. I could submit a 1990 list. 1995 is the point where I take a quick peek to see if there's something better to do, but I'll usually just leave it at 1995. Comfortable? 0. Happy? Acceptable? 10 to 5. If there's 15 points left over, I'm going to find something to change. 15 is too much. I cannot be inefficient. Beep, boop, must fix.
I would really like to see them with this, because they're doing free war gear costs, use the Age of Sigmar Triumph rule, where if you're below point, have less points than your opponent, you get some additional benefit.
I want a 10-point enhancement in the core rulebook.
Or that.
One character gets +1 to their wound characteristic. 10 points. That's it. Just a 10-point enhancement in the rulebook. Everyone gets it. It's not very good. Just shove it in there. Not a 5-1. Just 10 points. You get one free thing. That's it. That's what I'd like.
5 points for 6 of Phenopain?
Nope. That's 5 points is way too good for that. That's too good. 5 points, you get one free reroll of a hit roll per game. I don't know.
You become Uthar?
Exactly. Not flip, reroll. All right.
Thanks so much for the super chat. Then we got Yuruna. Thank you so much. So hot take here. I'd like to see the Power Armored Sisters hit T3, 2 wounds, 3 up save, puts the middle of the Marines and Guard in durability and damage buffs.
I don't think Sisters' durability for their model is a problem. What I would love to see is ways to get them to a 5-up interval. Why should a Sister be durable? She's wearing power armor and she believes in the Emperor. I don't think that means that she takes a bullet to the face better than a Space Marine who takes 1 bullet to the face and is like, I still have an eye left, stab. Like a human, she's a human being. She forgot to wear her helmet, right? If she takes a las gun around to the dome, she's probably out for the night. But I think an ability to get an invuln so there's more chances of my sister believed so hard that the las cannon bounced. That I like. Also, I think sisters should have output. Any at all. I don't think sisters' durability is the problem. I think that I would choose to fix other things. Yeah. But some small durability buff would be nice for sisters.
Then we've got Warchild. Thank you so much. Excited to see where my short kings are at now. Thanks for all the content, boys. Thank you. So Votann, I think they're solidly in the middle of the pack. They have room to go up because they do have a lot of stuff on the table. Mm-hmm. Their damage at times can be inconsistent outside of Hearthguard, but man, could they just have so many units on the board. So it's very interesting. I think they can punch up to the other armies in B tier. Probably. Mm-hmm. They might start to struggle with the A-tier armies, though, is my impression. But I will get plenty more games. And this Friday is Build a List Votann, so I'm going to build a list for Votann and play it the following week on the YouTube.
Very exciting. Okay.
Then we've got Scott Nago. Thank you so much. What about Venatari now? They did get a nice decrease. They're what,
Venatari,
200 points?
I think it's 200 for 3 clean.
Yeah.
Venatari are pretty good. I'm actually kind of feeling it. I kind of want to get some. I think actually Venatari play very well into that take a lot less characters idea, which you can go with. So, because I've been sitting on these rules for a couple days, thinking more about it. I could very well see myself wanting to take Venatari. That's 100% something I can justify. So, I might have to go get some. Because I think I've got a box of 3. Mm-hmm. I don't think I have a lot of Venatari, but I could.
I've got a bunch of them.
You've got a bunch, so maybe we play a couple games with them, get a feel, and then if I like them, I'll go buy some of my own. But I think Venatari are much improved. If you have Venatari, now's the time to put them on the table, test it. If you don't, I think they're still at the play a couple games before you spend the Forge World big bucks on it.
I agree.
I don't think that they're so obvious, like you just need Venatori, that you just go drop, $200 on 3 dudes, or whatever the Forge World price is. But I would play a couple games of the mate and say, hey, do you mind if I use these Wardens on a Cork as a Venatori real fast, just like I see how it goes. I think you can do that. Or like use these Inceptors as Venatori for a game to see how it goes.
Then we have Drew here with a $5 super chat. Death Guard, Hellbrute hype, absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Giving Contagion range out now is an amazing rule. So things that interact with Contagion, all of a sudden, because of the rules change, are way better, including the Hellbrute. So I've been seeing lists with 1 to 2 of them.
I don't think it's 3.
Yeah,
I don't think it's 3. I like 2 because they're a little slow, like all the things. And so it's sometimes easy to avoid 1. I think 2 is the right number, but we'll see how lists adapt. But 2 so that you've got a threat of it on each flank, I think is quite valid.
Yep. Then we've got Jonathan Haynes. Thank you so much for the super chat. What should my World Eaters Terminator loadout be? That's a great question. I have no idea what their loadout is, frankly. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, terribly embarrassed to say I have no idea what a World Eater Terminator gets. I'm going to guess that they can take a buttload of Power Fists and Combi Weapons. And then like 2 Reaper autocannons, because I'm pretty sure World Eaters just use the generic CSM kit.
I think so, yeah.
I believe that's
think they have a
just
special
what they
one.
use. So look at the warrior options.
Yep, the warrior options for ranged are Combi Bolter, Combi Weapon, Heavy Flamer, or the Reaper autocannons.
I fully support as many Combi Weapons as possible over the Storm Bolters.
Dev Wounds are magical.
Anti-Infantry 4+.
Yep. And then their melee options are Cursed Weapons at 4 attack, strength 6, AP 2, 1 damage. The Chain Fist, probably going to be Chain Fists, honestly.
Power Fist is
the Power Fist.
+1 weapon skill.
Yep.
But so it's one +1 weapon skill. Oh, nope, you're right. It's 1 less AP. Wow, that's... a Space Marine Chain Fist is AP2. So I didn't catch that.
It is AP2.
Yeah, a Space Marine Chain Fist is AP2. If a Chain Fist in World Eaters is AP3, you take that one.
Yep. Anti-Vehicle 3 plus,
that's
it
the
lets
one.
you help punch up.
That's the one.
Because your army is already good at anti-infantry, anti-vehicle is very helpful for strength 9.
So as many Chain Fists and combat weapons as possible, and then I think you just take 2 the autocannons, Reaper autocannons.
Then we got Zinth. Thanks so much for the $10 super chat. I think AdMech and Necrons got new rules changes because the codexes are on a boat coming from the printer in China at this point already. GW probably didn't want them day 1 invalid. They did actually change Skitarii, the 4-up save, 5-up invul, but I would have liked to see more. Hopefully the detachments are way better than Rad Saturation because, man, that thing, it just is so disappointing.
Yeah, AdMech datasheets aren't great, but I feel like AdMech datasheets are good enough to work in a good detachment.
If they have a good synergistic detachment that helps them do efficient damage, then they're back.
Yeah, so we'll see. AdMech are definitely an unfortunate spot, but at least you have the light at the end of the tunnel of, by the end of the year, we're probably looking at a big change. And you know what? If GW didn't buff them enough because they said, screw it, what actually matters is the detachment's coming, so be it.
If the detachments are great, I'm okay.
If I got told that Sisters were getting a new book in 6 months, I'd be ecstatic. So, 100%. Let's see what that brings for AdMech, but I believe you're onto something, Zinth. I think you're right.
Yeah. It is forcing me to build and paint 18 Breachers. I was trying to hold off on that, hoping for this balanced data slate, but now I have to do it. They are the best data sheet. Then we've got Ricky Chow. Thanks so much. Don't forget the tippy top S tier. Go ahead and put yourselves above Aeldari, you pretty kings. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Ricky Chow.
Blushing over here. Then we got Shackleton Mangram. Thank you so much. What's your all favorite spam list? The kind that are only theoretical, but you make a list in the app for and stare at longingly sometimes. Good question.
I've got mine. Do you have yours?
No. Yeah, let me think about it.
Mine is Pyrovore spam. I want it so bad. Unfortunately, a new model on specifically a larger base size means that I feel the need to acquire at least new bases, ideally new models, before I play that. Because unfortunately, the base changed by enough of a margin that I am not getting representative data by using the old models. I need the new bases. Still, that is the funny thing that I want in my life. I don't know if it's good, but it's so funny that I want it.
I'm going to answer this from the perspective of the average AdMech player and say the 9 Dragoon, 9 Iron Strider variant of AdMech, because they're very cheap for like the durability you get out of them. Yeah. But man, the models are extremely expensive. I happen to have enough, but I haven't built all those Dragoons because there's a lot of work.
Yeah. At that point, then I'm gonna give it a second answer.
Yeah.
Which is 9 Paragons, 6 Mortifiers, 6 Penitent Engines. A list I own, but I'm unwilling to play.
Yes.
And I'm shamed. I'm shamed.
All right. So then we've got John Apocalypse. Thank you so much. Can you make a Tau army where the crisis suits have the cyclic plasma fusion combo? Not a fan of having to build a meta list. If you don't want to build a meta list, you don't have to spam cyclic if you don't want to. It is by far the best weapon, but those are the next two that you would run, plasma and fusion. So if you want to run a combination of them, that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. If you're not trying to win GTs and majors and that type of stuff, you don't need to run 3 cyclic on every single crisis body. That's okay. The other weapons aren't like horrendously bad. They're just not as efficient as cyclic.
Yep.
Then we got Matt O. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Sisters at the bottom of the pack, and I still feel better about them at events. Has the change to Insane Bravery had a real impact in your games? Felt like the most random change. It, in fact, did just the other day when we played Tau vs. Tyranids.
It did?
Yeah.
Oh. What did it impact?
Because I couldn't roll it and then auto pass it.
Oh yeah, no.
There was like a critical moment where I had to spend my CP and wouldn't get a strike and fade the next turn.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Because John was
primary.
Yeah, exactly. I really wanted that primary.
Okay, yeah, so that's fair.
That's the time it's come up.
It has felt mildly impactful. I have not yet hit the point where someone really wanted to auto pass and couldn't. I haven't hit that
will
yet.
come.
It will come, but the thing is that most armies that cause battle shock to be a problem do it out of sequence. They don't do it in the battle shock
where you
stuff,
can't auto pass it.
where you can't auto pass anyway. So not great, but not bad.
I'm gonna bet here live on stream that it's gonna happen. Nick is gonna be the first person who doesn't have the CP to auto pass but needs to.
He's gonna have the CP. He's gonna have already used it.
Yeah, he's gonna use it.
That's true. Nick's gonna be the first to not be able to do that. All right.
Thank you so much, Logan. Mad Neat. How do you think the Eldar kill Necron warrior blobs? Did you test it? Thank you. Great work, guys. So they had a couple blast weapons. Quinn was trying out 10 Shadow Specters, but at the end of the day, it's not reliable that they do it.
Yeah.
Their best tool is to kill enough of them that they're far away from the middle, and then tie them up with stuff like Warwalkers and.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best bet. Because you don't have to win the game by killing the Necron warriors, and Eldar are well equipped to kill everything else.
Yeah,
and that's
just
usually that gets them where they need to be.
Yep. Honorable Mr. Hardwork, thank you so much. Love the Death Guard buff. How do you deal when people start to realize their new army rule has a 6-inch range for the first 2 turns? Hellbrutes help.
Hellbrutes help. I think Mortarion can improve the aura of it as well. So if he's getting connected places, he can use that. I think that's one of his 3 choose a command phase buffs. And it's not, and you can still have the ignore mods because that's an entirely separate rule. So you can have both of those active at the same time. I think that it is still a flaw of Death Guard, but you try to slow the pace of the game down so that not much happens on the first couple turns. And then by the time the action starts, because you hid and crapped up the board, you weren't going for maximum damage, you weren't getting hit either, and then the game kind of starts on turn 3, and you're like, surprise, I'm actually got a full rule now. Yeah, it's real.
And the thing is, Death Guard don't want to take a lot of damage in the early game because they need to get to the middle of the table first.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the super chat. John McCardell, $20 super chat.
Whoop, whoop,
Blood
John.
for the Blood God! World leaders need a declining feel no pain to range attacks to survive shooting early in the game.
I would love... John McCardell, that is an idea that I think would be fantastic, which is that you make one of the blood type tables 5+ feel no pain against enemy attacks that are more than 18 inches away. Or you could even, it'd probably be too complicated for the simplified edition we live in. If I had to choose, I would say 24 inches away or more, 4 up feel no pain. More than 12 away, 5 up feel no pain. Within 12, 6 up feel no pain, none in melee. Because Khorne does not care if skulls come in honorable combat. I think that would be an amazingly cool rule to put on world leaders, but that's a little complicated. But yeah, but something like that, something in that vein, GW, you don't have to bill me, you can just use that. It's free, go ahead, GW. But something like that would be amazingly thematic. You get Khorne's blessing, you can do it as an invuln, you can do it as a feel no pain, you can do it as something to make it hard to shoot world leaders from very long range, but not in a Nurgle, you can't shoot me kind of way, because it needs to feel different to me. I don't want you to copy and paste a Nurgle rule into a World Leaders book. That's, no.
Then we got Catchy, thanks so much. Only play 3 armies per year. How would that affect your comp?
Ooh, if you could only play 3 armies per year.
Yeah.
I think that would mostly just affect my teams. Because in singles play, I don't really want to play more than 3 armies in a year. If I had to pick armies for the next 12 months, I think I would happily say Tyranid Space Marines. Those are my 2 main ones. And I'll leave a slot open for if one of my armies gets a really exciting update.
Yep.
But I like, frankly, love the Necron and Admech looks. If those armies get awesome codexes, I'm still not taking them to tournaments. I don't think it would affect comp play that much, especially once we get the game a little more balanced. And by we, I mean GW.
Yep.
Because, once you get, Orc players who feel the need to play Eldar just so that they can, win tournaments, that's a shame. That's a shame. Benjer, I mean, if anyone if anyone were to do that, I would just feel bad. I'd pity that person.
So, me personally, 3 armies. I pretty much play 5 armies,
Yeah.
and I just like playing those 5 armies, the ones I built and painted myself. So, those are the ones I already like. 3, I would have to cut 2 of them in the cycle, but there's always going to be 3. 3 is plenty of options.
I think I could hold myself to 3 very easily. Team tournaments are where it gets weird. Because sometimes the team is like, hey, we have 2 Tyranid players. We have 2 Eldar players. We need you to pick up something for the team. If you held that to singles, though, I wouldn't even be mad.
Yeah.
Wouldn't even be mad.
Yeah, like I picked up Deathwatch for ATC, and
Yeah.
literally 0 games with Deathwatch.
Yep,
before
and 0 cents.
Yep. And long may it remain. Then we got Magnus the Blue. Do I kill or ignore the Transcendent Catan with Thousand Suns?
Ignore if you can. It's not incredible damage.
If you can tie it up with a Rhino or some nonsense thing, that's ideal. And just take away its advance so it can't get in the backfield and start doing stuff. Yeah, don't let it get behind your lines. But if a unit has to be sacrificed to just tie it up, then it's not really doing too much. And it doesn't just kill whole squads, generally. It can pop off with the sustained hits, but it's not that good. It's not that good in shooting. It's not that good in combat. It's just a very durable piece. And if you can get it tied up away from objectives, that's the ideal.
Yep.
Then we've got Jimmy here with a $5 super chat. World Eaters 8-bound and Exalted 8-bounds are overcosted because of the Alpha Strike potential. 8-bound can move 21 inches first turn and still charge. And that's, you see it. Like, World Eaters do have a dramatic difference between going first and going second. And Games Workshop was, I think, pretty careful in trying not to let that get insane.
I agree. I would love to, whenever World Eaters get a codex, I don't know, the same day they announce 11th edition, I would love it if on that same day, I'm kidding, hopefully I'm kidding, I would love it if they had like a slight tone down to their first turn potential, and then a slight increase to their rest of the game potential, so that you don't just run into and then the 8-bound deploy on the line, look you in the eye and roll a dice, because that's a great way to win games and a terrible way to win a tournament. Yeah. And that is what we were judging in this tier list.
And then we got Callum here. Thanks so much for the super chat. What do you think of the Melta weapons giving additional strength as well as damage at half range? It needs to do something.
Anti-vehicle.
Yep.
Anti-vehicle, like 3+ in half range. I don't...
And monster.
Something. And monster.
We shouldn't be... There's a lot of anti-vehicle and very few anti-monster, and the weapons are supposed to do the same thing against both.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit of a Melta enthusiast. I like Melta guns.
It would help Sisters and Fusion a lot.
It would help. Just the changes to Melta have me dejected, heartbroken. Again, every time I'm like rolling a multi-Melta, and I'm like, all right, wound on a 2, and they're like, actually, I'm T5. I'm like, God, wounds on a 3. Actually, I'm -1 to wound. Oh my God, wound on a 4 with a multi-Melta shooting a dude.
Almost every vehicle you see is T10, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's like, well, don't you get rerolls from Morven Vol? Just on that unit. Multi-Meltas need something. I think you could take him to Strength 10. I think you could take him to 24. I think you could take him to Strength 10 and 24. And you could give him anti-vehicle in half range. Anything. I would rather Melta give anti-vehicle in half range than the damage in half range, because I can't get the wounds through. I can't make him take saves. It's not the damage problem.
Then we've got Brother Tobias. Thank you so much. Harp Jackster was defeated. Jack Harpster got Sanguinary Guard back. Death Guard love. Never let it end. And it won't. Quinn is very excited to play them.
Absolutely.
And,
our true one Death Guard player.
One of our other players who might be dabbling with Death Guard.
You never know.
Likes to chase around. He might be playing it Wednesday into Custodes. Death Guard versus Custodes, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on this channel. Let's find out how much that matchup changed. All right, and that looks to be all of the different super chats. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us once again. We really appreciate all the support. Hope you're excited about the new balanced meta as we are, because once again, it just is much closer than it was before, and that is a massive positive because it just wasn't before. And I'm excited to play pretty much all my armies. and I know a lot of people are excited to play their own. So if you like this type of content, give us a like. Go ahead and leave a comment letting us know what you're most excited to play. What do you think of the tier list? Where would you put the different factions? And then subscribe to the channel. On top of that, if you want additional balance update content, the War Room has a ton of it. We've already got 4 balance update games in there, or 5, and there's more coming this week, and the future ones, obviously. And then on top of that, there's tons of State of the Factions on each of the different armies that's going to be releasing over the course of this week and the next. So look out for that. Every faction's getting kind of what we think are going to be the best list heading into this new meta. So if that's what you're interested in, there's a 3-day free trial below, thewarroom.vhx.tv. Sign up and check it out. All right, well, thanks so much, John, for hanging out with me.
Thanks for being here with me, Richard.
Hope everybody enjoyed this one, and we will see you all very soon for some more content. Coming up tomorrow, like I said, Death Guard versus Custodes on the channel. Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern, we have the Fix My List, which is going to focus on some of the most improved factions. And then on Friday, Build a List for Votann, which will be played on stream on Wednesday next week.
One quick note to make. I see a couple people asking the same question in chat. Some people are asking about lists for the Tau versus Tyranids game we just played. If you want to see what's in the War Room, now is the best time to try that free trial Richard just mentioned. It's in the link below, thewarroom.vhx.tv. Click that link, go get in there, enjoy a free trial. We think that what we have is really good in the War Room. A lot of people enjoy it, so come check out the high quality content we make and be a part of our awesome Discord community. And then you can also see what list we ran, because that was a good game. That Tau versus Tyranids,
really good.
I think both of us came out of that game feeling pretty good about our armies.
Yep.
You know, there was a winner, there was a loser. Neither of us were sad after that one.
They're right here.
Yeah.
So it was a very great matchup, and you're finally getting to see some brand new stuff.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everybody. We'll see you all next time, and really appreciate your support.
All right.
So
Bye-bye.
long for now.